Hello everyone. This is not a story for the faint of heart. Today, we will be stepping into the darkness of the most gruesome cases, where evil not only exists, but also leaves bloody and haunting traces. This is Real Gruesome Murder Cases, a series of true stories about murders that made the whole world shudder. If you are ready to face the cold truth in the gruesome corners of humanity, come with me to delve deeper into each case, dressed for ruin. On a sticky Saturday evening in downtown Philadelphia, the line for Eden's Eden wrapped around the block. Blaring, fast-tempo music and strobing neon invaded the detectives' senses as they pushed their way through a throng of warm, gyrating bodies to take a seat at the bar. The stench of sweat and stale beer permeated the dark room, and the rush of frigid air from the vents above offered minimal relief from the stifling heat. The officers shouted to make themselves heard over the din, while several people almost knocked the men from their seats in their drunken attempt to squeeze between them and get the bartender's attention. The younger of the two men, a clean-shaven blonde with neatly combed hair and stern hazel eyes, tugged at his tie and scowled at a group of scantily clad women with neon-painted bodies as they approached him. They gave him sour looks and a few rude gestures in return before scampering off to find a more willing recipient of their affections. His partner looked down on most of the room at almost 6 feet. Gray streaked through his dark, purposely disheveled hair, and there was a hard glint in his cobalt eyes. His broad shoulders and well-built barrel chest, along with the faint scars littering his arms, made Vincent look less approachable than the blonde detective. The illusion was broken by the deep laugh lines etched into his cheeks as he chuckled and teased his dour partner. "You didn't have to scowl at them like that. The poor girls were just being friendly." The blonde scoffed, rolling his eyes as he said, "I'm not interested in their kind of friendship. Besides, we're here to work, not socialize, remember? Speaking of, should we really be consorting with criminals to solve cases?" Vincent ordered a Corona and lime from a bartender even taller than him, with bubblegum pink and deep purple hair, styled in a short mohawk. He accepted the drink with a charming grin and left a generous tip before facing his partner, ignoring his disapproving glare. Criminals make the best informants. This one has helped us with a lot of cases. Her information network is invaluable. The younger detective grit his teeth, holding back an argument. No matter his feelings, the boy had to accept that their case had gone from nearly solved to stone cold in less than 24 hours. They needed whatever help they could get. Vincent's partner tugged at his tie. Sweat rolled down the boy's neck and stained his collar. He had tried to convince him to change out of his uniform, but was unsurprised when he refused. He wondered if the stubborn boy regretted it now with the sweltering heat pressing in on them. Vincent downed his drink and ordered another while his partner gave in, removing his tie and unbuttoning the top 2 buttons. The young detective barked another question before Vincent could comment. "Where is this informant then? Every minute we waste here is another our suspect has to flee the country." "Oh, I don't think we have to worry about that. She should be here any..." "Ah, there she is." They turned their attention to the top of a metal staircase at the back of the club. Vincent's throat felt dry despite the 2 drinks he'd already finished as he watched his old friend step through the VIP entrance. She gave her white suede jacket to the doorman with an alluring smile, then turned to face the officers as she descended the stairs. Diamond-studded gold stilettos clicked against the metal as she went. Her strapless, midnight pantsuit with a plunging neckline swayed around her ankles and long legs, but cinched tightly at her waist to accentuate wide hips and hug her chest. The fabric shimmered under the strobing neon lights, and the diamond choker that cascaded down her throat like a waterfall and nestled between her breasts flashed brightly. Smooth olive-toned skin contrasted the gleaming jewels perfectly. Bright copper ringlets spilled partially over one shoulder. The rest pulled back with a clip to show off the shaved right side of her head. Russet painted lips with a prominent cupid's bow, dark thick lashes, and a chocolate smoky eye highlighted her high cheekbones and bright electric blue eyes. Vincent turned to face his partner as he scoffed and said, "You're joking." "Nope." "Detective, I'd like you to meet Evelyn Ross." "Evelyn, this is my new partner, Connor Williams." Connor was so distracted by her appearance that he hadn't realized she was walking right toward them. Evelyn smiled coyly and extended an intricately manicured hand. Tiny rhinestones were arranged in a rose design on every other stiletto-shaped nail, which were painted to match her eyes. Her breathy tone was deeper than Vincent remembered, and laced with expertly veiled sarcasm. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Detective." Reluctantly taking her proffered hand, Connor forced an awkward smile and said, "Likewise." Her lips twitched with amusement as she dropped his hand and turned to speak to Vincent with something akin to fondness. "Join me for a drink?" "Of course." Evelyn lifted a panel and moved behind the bar towards a burgundy-painted steel door. Vincent 2 steps behind her. Connor followed, but the senior detective shook his head and said, "Wait here. Get a drink or something. I won't be long." Then, before Connor had a chance to question him, Vincent followed the gang leader through the door. As the steel door to Evelyn's office closed behind him with a click, a chill washed over Vincent's face and arms, leaving goosebumps in its wake. A faint aroma of vanilla and dark cherries replaced the reek of sweat. Vincent's stiff shoulders relaxed at the familiar scent. 4 sleek leather armchairs surrounded a mahogany card table, and a personal bar stood in the far left corner. An ashtray made of cobalt glass sat on the table, clean and empty of any remnants. Vincent's fingers itched for the smokes tucked in his breast pocket. A single painting of a man and 2 women performing around a piano hung on the wall opposite him. It had hung there since the day it went missing from a museum in Boston some 30 years ago, when he was barely a thought. Evelyn's office was quiet, except for the clinking of glass as she poured them drinks. The reinforced concrete walls, painted evergreen, blocked out all trace of music or chatter from the club. Vincent sunk into the cool, smooth leather, stifling a sigh. Evelyn sauntered over to the table, sitting on top directly in front of him and crossing her legs before handing him his glass. Vincent enjoyed the bitterness of the bourbon as it washed over his tongue and slid down his throat. She always did have the best taste in liquor. Vincent watched his old friend curiously as she set the glass aside and leaned close to pull 2 Camel Blue 100s and a lighter from his front pocket. Her lips just shy of grazing his stubbled cheek, and the heady aroma of vanilla and dark cherries briefly overwhelmed him. Electric blue eyes dancing with mirth bore into his as she slipped the cig between his teeth and lit it for him. Then, a rush of clarity and disappointment hit hard as she sat back to light her own. Curls of white smoke drifted from her lips and slowly filled the room. She stared him down with a raised brow until the cigarette had burnt down almost to the filter. Then she said, "So, you going to tell me what you want?" He raised his own brows and grinned teasingly as he answered, "Can't I just come to see an old friend?" Her unimpressed stare pulled a snort of laughter from his lips. She held her hand out expectantly and retorted, "Not when you have your dog waiting outside." Vincent relented with a sigh and pulled a file from inside his jacket, which she snapped from his fingers and threw open on the table next to her. The detective lowered his leg from the table and leaned forward to look over its contents, which she was flipping through with a carefully placid expression. The faces of 15 young women stared up at him, all of whom had gone missing within the last 6 months. The final photograph in the file was a mugshot of a man with beady gray eyes, greasy black hair, a pudgy face, and a sad, wispy little mustache. Vincent watched Evelyn's face carefully as her bright eyes paused on his picture, looking for any sign of recognition. If she did know the man, she wasn't giving it away, so he decided to probe her a little. He's our main suspect. Goes by the name Rob, full name Robert Carroll. We've been tracking him down for a month, even got a hit on his hideout. Then we go in for the raid last night, and he's gone without a trace, so now we've hit a dead end. Do you recognize him? Evelyn placed the picture back in the file, closed it, and took a generous sip from her drink before answering with a carefully even tone. Afraid not, should I? Vincent kept his own tone light as he pushed a little more. Well, our files say he was one of your men until about a year ago. You've made it a point to know the names of everyone who works for you, haven't you? The stare she pinned him with was bitterly cold, and her breathy voice took on a dangerous edge. My organization doesn't deal in sex trafficking, a fact of which I know you're quite aware. Yes. I'm also very aware of how you've punished those who have gone behind your back in the past, which is why I thought you might be able to help me find my suddenly missing suspect. The way her lips curled into a cruel sneer and her face turned away confirmed his suspicions that she was involved in Robert's disappearance. He sighed as he put out his cigarette, stood, and placed his arms on either side of Evelyn's hips, caging her in. She met his gaze with pursed lips as he asked, "Where is he, Evie?" The brazen woman leaned forward, trailing her sharp nails down the side of his jaw and over his chest. The coy smirk was back as she goaded him. "If I did know where he is, why should I hand him over to you? My men are mine to punish. That's the deal we made, remember? This isn't some petty drug dealer who stole from you. This man is responsible for the disappearance of 15 women that we know of. Who knows how many are still alive? Their families deserve justice." Evie rolls her eyes and scoffs at his appeal to her better nature. "Oh yes, sitting comfortably in a jail cell watching TV and getting 3 meals a day sounds like justice to me. Those families deserve to see him strung up and castrated. Try again." Vincent muttered a curse under his breath. If it were anyone else, he would just get a warrant, but Evelyn had become untouchable in the last few years. She had half the department, the mayor, even their state senator in her pocket. No one would dare sign a warrant against her, and she'd never take a threat from him seriously anyway. Time to change tactics. He wove his left hand into her ginger curls, running calloused fingers down the back of her neck. She tensed at the contact and repressed a shiver, but the goosebumps erupting over her arms and the excitement in her eyes gave her away. Encouraged, Vincent pressed his forehead against hers and whispered, "For me, then, as a favor to an old friend?" Her nails grazed his cheek again as she glowered. "Right. A friend who only comes to see me when he wants something. I feel a little used. Maybe you could give me something in exchange for my kindness." "What do you want?" He could guess the answer, had known her long enough to read the cues. In their previous meetings, she had always treated him like he was just another business partner, careful to keep her distance, giving no hint toward their long-standing and complicated friendship. Her forwardness now was telling, but he wanted her to say it. A selfish part of him needed her to admit that she had missed their closeness. Evie pushed him back into the chair, placing her knees on either side of his and pulling herself close. Her hand left his cheek, burying itself into his messy dark locks, gripping tight. Evelyn's electric blue eyes bore into his as she said, "Don't play dumb, Vince. It doesn't suit you, and I'm not in the mood for any more games." It was as much of an admission as he was going to get, and Vincent gave in with a groan as he pulled her lips to his in a bruising kiss, one that she returned with just as much vigor. Sometime later, Vincent watched with hazy satisfaction as the cobalt lace of Evie's lingerie disappeared back underneath her shimmering silk outfit. When Evie faced him with an equally sated look, he took a moment to appreciate her swollen, though still perfectly painted lips. Her hair, which he had torn from its clip, cascaded over her shoulders in a wild tangle of curls that made her look deceptively innocent. One could almost mistake her for a normal woman like this, instead of a dangerous crime boss. He wondered how many others had been permitted to see her that way, then scolded himself for hoping he was the only one. Vincent gave up that chance a long time ago, the day he swore his oath and joined the police force. Even this small indulgence was one he shouldn't have allowed himself. Once they finished straightening themselves, the pair looked at each other. Vincent lamented the return of Evelyn's closed-off expression that had been so open and vulnerable under his touch just a few minutes ago. But their time was up, and he came here for a reason. He struggled to keep the regret out of his tone as he asked, "So, where can I find Mr. Carroll?" Evelyn grinned playfully, hips swaying as she walked over to the bar, picked up a cell phone, and hit one of the speed dial numbers. After a few moments, the call picked up. Her orders were curt. "Bring him in." A side door that Vincent swore was a wall before opened, and a beat-up, barely conscious man who matched Rob's description to a T was shoved through by two bulky, suited thugs. Rob, with hands tied in front of him, collapsed to his knees. The thugs backed out without a word, and the door shut behind them, leaving nothing but smooth wall in its place. Evelyn laughed at his incredulous glare and said, "He's all yours, detective." Vincent rolled his eyes and strode over to the quickly fading man, tossing a sarcastic remark over his shoulder as he yanked the suspect up. "If you were going to hand him over anyway, why bother making such a fuss?" She giggled and walked over to open the burgundy door for him. He could already see his younger partner's expression morphing from annoyance to surprise and disbelief. Evie's breath at his ear sent a tingle down his spine. "Well, I thought he would make a good gift, but I wanted something too. Don't pretend you didn't enjoy it." He glanced to the right to meet her roguish grin as she continued, "Happy birthday." Connor took the unconscious trafficker off his hands, so Vincent turned back to Evie, who stood in the doorway with arms crossed, looking way too pleased with herself. He had forgotten that his birthday was tomorrow, and that it was something he and Evie shared. Vincent chuckled wryly and carded a scarred hand through his hair as he thanked her. Then he helped Connor drag their suspect out to the car, tossed him in the back, and settled into the driver's seat. From the corner of his eye, he saw his partner open his mouth, most likely to barrage him with questions. "Don't ask, it's complicated. But now you see what I was saying about Evelyn being one of our best informants. This isn't the first time she's handed our guy right to us, and it probably won't be the last." Connor didn't press for more information. He faced front with a thoughtful, almost conflicted look, and the ride to the station passed in silence. A silence that Vincent spent thinking of her, of their bodies pressed together, and foolishly wishing that he could do it again, obscure recollection. "Dad, where are the yams at?" Frankie yelled up the basement stairs. "Behind the peas, son," Dad yelled back. As Frankie walked to turn the light switch off, he looked over at his father's terrible masonry job that he did right after Frankie's 12th birthday. Until recently, the basement had always been a place Frankie's mother and father never allowed them in. The only things down there were various odds and ends, his father's tools and the freezer next to the pantry. Frankie flipped the switch, putting the basement back into darkness again. "Jenny, did Robert tell you what happened at school the other day?" asked Frankie. "No, he never calls me anymore," said Jenny. As Mom was mashing the potatoes Dad had cleaned and prepped for her, Frankie handed Dad the yams he requested. "Well, I met Susie. She's in my biology class. She also wants to be an X-ray tech. She is so cool," said Frankie. "Oh, Frankie, another one? What happened to, what's her name?" asked Jenny. "Rebecca," Frankie said somberly. "Yay, what happened to her?" asked Jenny. "I have no idea. She just disappeared. Everything seemed to be going great. Then she just ghosted me," said Frankie. "She probably ran off with someone else. I never liked that girl," said Mom. "Frankie!" yelled Robert from the living room. "Come here. I think this is the lion's year." "Okay, hang on," Frankie yelled back. "Better go and watch the game, son," Dad said. "Yay, okay," replied Frankie. It was Thanksgiving for the Goldsmiths, a real family affair. All the kids were out back with their father, Jenny's husband, playing in the snow. Mom was trying to finish the pies, and Jenny was doing the usual Wordle on her phone. Robert was in the living room watching the game, the usual Thanksgiving chaos. As Frankie went to sit with Robert, there was an abundance of chips, dips, and cakes on the coffee table. "They are killing the Bears," said Robert happily. "What's the score?" asked Frankie. 38-10. It's going to be their year, I swear," said Robert. As Frankie kicked back watching the game with his brother, the kids were on the back deck taking off their snow gear, and Robert started complaining. He was not a kid person. The three siblings were all completely different due to being adopted. However, they were still solid in their bonds with each other, and Robert always kept his opinions to himself. "My name is Frankie Goldsmith. I am here on Thanksgiving telling a story so screwed up, it's hard to tell it without it sounding like a Criminal Minds episode. No, seriously. If I was outside my head, I wouldn't believe it myself. Let's get back to it. Frankie was in college chasing a degree as an X-ray technician. His sister Jenny was the oldest, being in her mid-30s with 3 children. Her husband, James, was a salesman with a local company. He was a good guy who went to work, came home, and enjoyed his simple and organic life. "Everyone to the table! It's time to eat!" yelled Dad. Everyone rushed to the table. Mom's cooking was impeccable. This was one of 3 major meals cooked at the Goldsmiths that was off-the-chain delicious. The other 2 are Easter and Christmas New Year's. All the food was great and unique to its holiday. As they gathered around and sat, Jenny's twins, Lenny and Lucy, started arguing. "I want to sit next to him," shouted Lucy. "No, I am," argued Lenny. "Stop it, you two." "Olivia, you sit next to Paw Paw," James said to his oldest daughter. Lenny and Lucy seemed to argue about everything. We all settled into our seats and grabbed our neighbor's hand so Dad can say grace, which was one of our family traditions. As Dad began, that's when this story goes from 0 to 100 real quick. "Father, as we gather here today, we give thanks to you." Crack. Boom. The front door exploded open, and in rushed at least 30 police officers, fully armed and yelling for everyone to get on the ground. 2 of the officers grabbed the children and rushed them out the hole where our parents' front door used to be. Now, let's pause. You gotta be wondering, what in the hell is going on? Let's back it up just a little bit, like 6 months. We will get back to it, I promise. First, I gotta catch you up some so you understand what the hell is happening. Jenny showed up around 10:30 a.m. to talk to Mom about the new outfits she purchased for Olivia. I was at the table studying for an exam I had later that week. Jenny chatted to Mom about the clothes. Then she started to explain that she saw a TikTok about a cold case that reminded her of a reoccurring dream she had. Mom's face went blank and she asked, "What did you do, Jenny?" "Nothing. What do you mean?" Jenny replied. The room lost all its happy energy as I picked up Mom's vibes. Oblivious, Jenny continued to talk about this TikTok and how she thought it was about her birth parents. "Mom, you said the orphanage told you that my parents were very young and just left me there?" Jenny asked. "Yes, dear. Now enough of this talk. I need to go to the grocery store." "You two lock up if you leave," Mom said. Something was definitely up to something. Mom appeared so rattled as she was fumbling about. She left in such a hurry she forgot to grab her phone. Jenny came over and sat at the table with me. "Frankie, I have to tell you something, but you can't tell Mom and Dad," Jenny said with a serious expression. I nodded and she asked, "Have you ever heard of 23andMe?" "No. What's that?" Frankie asked. "They use DNA to find out your ancestral family tree. I sent off my DNA and discovered that I am from Northern Africa," Jenny said. "Okay, why the sudden interest?" Frankie asked. "That is not important. What is important is that I found out who my birth parents were," Jenny said. "Were?" Frankie asked, puzzled. "Jenny, what is going on?" "Hang on." Jenny got up and walked over to the counter where Mom's phone was and picked it up. She tried to unsuccessfully unlock the phone twice. "What are you doing?" Frankie yelled. "That's Mom's phone." "You are acting crazy." "I got to know for sure, Frankie," Jenny said. Frankie paused a minute, sighed heavily and said, "Try our birth years." The phone unlocked and Jenny started to go through it, and it was all normal stuff. "It doesn't make sense," Jenny said quietly. "Will you tell me what is going on?" "What did you think was going to be on it?" Frankie asked. "Frankie, Mom and Dad kidnapped us," Jenny blurted out. "There is no orphanage. My name is not Jennifer Goldsmith, it's Ada Abimbola. My parents and I went missing 31 years ago." "What? This can't be true. Mom and Dad would not do this," Frankie yelled. "Frankie, I researched it. It's true. I talked to a detective, and we cannot tell them we know. We must act normally. The detective believes there are more children they kidnapped besides me, you and Robert. The police know and discovered who you are too," Jenny said. Frankie knew it was true. As hard as it was to believe, he could feel it. What now? This was all he could think. He walked over and sat on the couch, and Jenny came over and sat next to him, knowing exactly what he was feeling. Betrayal, hurt, and curiosity. Who were these people? "Frankie, we must work with the police. James knows all about it, but we cannot tell Robert," Jenny said seriously. "The police are watching Mom and Dad. They think they are holding another family now. Can you meet with Detective Hunt? He will explain everything to you," Jenny continued. "Okay, now that you are all caught up, what now? Should I leave it alone and just walk away? No, you say? All right, I will finish the story the best way I can, but it doesn't get better. If you're sure? Okay, let's get to it." Just as the two officers brought the children outside, Dad jumped up and ran towards a cabinet. Pop, pop. The police shot him just as he was reaching into the cabinet. Robert kept yelling, "Can someone please tell me what is going on?" I yelled over at him to just do as they say. Mom got onto the floor, and it was obvious by her face that she knew exactly what was going on. The gig was up. As I was lying on the floor, I looked over at Dad, and he was not moving, just bleeding out. I did not feel any remorse. The officers handcuffed Mother and led her out the door. They let the rest of us get up. Jenny, James, and I took Robert over to the couch and told him what was going on. He just sat staring blankly, not saying anything. Life seemed to come to a halt after that. Everything played out exactly like Detective Hunt said, except one detail. They never expected that one, overlooked detail. The police took Dad, or Thomas Dunning's phone, and found evidence of everything. Information and photos of all the children they abducted, the ones they sold, the parents they killed. In the basement, they found the remains of over 40 bodies behind the block wall, as well as a torture chamber. They also discovered multiple storage units spread across 7 states. There was one thing that Detective Hunt could not figure out until this day, right now. As I tell this story, there is one more loose end. What changed 18 years ago? Why did they change their MO? Detective Hunt cross-referenced everything. Who was helping them abduct these children? That is when I figured it out. Well, it was something I just felt. Do you want to know? Okay, I'll tell you. It has been about 6 months since the takedown. This was the weirdest affair Colorado had ever seen. Jenny, Frankie, and Robert tried to move on, but it was almost impossible because their life was now on every news station. Frankie tried moving twice with the same result. One day, Robert was visiting, and he and Frankie were talking when it happened. Something Robert said caught Frankie's attention, and he knew. The only way Robert could know that was if he was a part of it. Frankie bought a gun for protection, and he tried to act normally as he went for it. He slid the drawer open as Robert watched. Oh no, it was gone. Frankie looked up and Robert motioned him to sit down. The end? Or was this all an obscure recollection? R.I.P. Michael Brent Haddix. I want to dedicate this one to my brother. At 6:30 p.m. Saturday, my brother passed away. He had been battling liver failure for 2 years. Thanks everyone at Reedsy. You guys really are my friends and colleagues. I found writing and left alcoholism behind. This community has been my therapy to keep me away from this disease. I miss you already, Michael. I won't be home for Christmas. Life can be messy, complicated, difficult. Sometimes you can just lose yourself in all of it, and in the process, you can lose sight of the things that actually matter. And then one day a storm comes out of the clear blue sky, and you get blown overboard by the tempest, and all is lost in the blink of an eye. This is what happened to me. I just got caught up in all of the things that don't really matter. Money, career status, an address in the right part of town and elite private schools for the kids, and new luxury import autos, and Swiss-made wristwatches with tasteful but recognizable brand logos. Material things. Then came a day when I realized how unimportant it all was, but it was too late. Still, at first I tried to keep up the pretense of normality in the face of immeasurable loss. I had already bought the 12-foot Douglas fir Christmas tree and put up the holiday decorations all around the house. Family was flying in from 3 different states to visit for the holiday. I had arranged car service from the airport for everyone, a catered gourmet dinner for Christmas Eve, nice gifts for all, and I even took the time to memorize a heartwarming toast to the whole family before we sat down to eat. In the end, I had to just junk this because of the references to my wife and children. More than that, really. It just didn't work at all anymore. What was I supposed to do? I felt some strange obligation to appear unfazed, composed, in control of my emotions and my world. I don't know. That has always been my way, or at least the image I have always wanted to project. It's hard to say how much of it was ever truly real, and how much I just manufactured, for whatever reason. And it doesn't matter any longer anyway. It all happened on the evening of December 23rd, and everyone was flying in the next day. I was just numb afterwards, and didn't have the time or motivation for all the phone calls before those flights took off in the morning, so I was left with no choice but to inform everyone of what happened when they arrived at our house that day. My house. Once they were all there, and I had dodged the uncomfortable questions for as long as I possibly could, I gave a very different and mostly improvised speech from the one I had originally planned. Somehow, I made it to the end with dry eyes, though no one else did. I cried enough the previous night at the hospital. I wasn't sad anymore. I was just angry now. Well, folks, it seems that everyone has had a chance to grab a beverage, and although we are not fully gathered together as a family right now, I would like to proceed with some very unfortunate news that I have to share at this time. Not exactly a toast. Nothing like a toast, actually. The opposite of a toast. Just some words I have to say. I took a deep breath and a long, slow sip of my Macallan Scotch. I felt all the eyes on me, and I thought about what I should say, what I could say. I hadn't planned this out. I tried. I just couldn't. I want to thank you all for coming this far to spend the Christmas holiday with us, but I am afraid that us is just me now. Yesterday evening, around 6:30 p.m., Melanie and the kids were driving home from the mall down the road when they were T-boned at the intersection of Torrance and Sepulveda by a 25-year-old off-duty sheriff's deputy named Kyle Langtree, who ran a red light. All three of them were killed, but the sheriff's deputy, driving a large SUV, only sustained a concussion and some minor injuries. He is still in St. Mary's right now, but expected to be released within a day or two. I paused and drained off the rest of my scotch. Everyone stared at me, their faces fixed in various expressions of shock and horror and disbelief, the tears already starting to fall. Hands were raised to cover mouths. I took another deep breath and continued, not even knowing what to say next, only knowing that I had to say something. I kind of muttered the next part down towards my shoes. The local news channels are all reporting that this sheriff's deputy had just left a holiday party at a bar down the street, and the LAPD officer who was first on the scene breathalyzed this guy, and he apparently blew a 1.8 BAC, more than twice the legal level for DUI. When the LAPD cop radioed this in, he was advised that this sheriff's deputy was the younger brother of both the local DA and the U.S. congressman representing this district. This was picked up over the police scanners used by several local news outlets. Instead of being taken to jail, he was taken to St. Mary's, like I said. Apparently, he also had 2 prior DUIs that were both dismissed for no apparent reason. You can read about it all here in today's paper if you want. Front page. I dropped a copy of the local newspaper on the table. I paused again. I didn't know what else to say. My older brother Jamie came up and gave me a powerful hug and whispered some kind words in my ear and cried some tears onto my neck and collar. My Aunt Jane approached me, but then stopped, not knowing what to do. I didn't blame her. I didn't either, but I did my best. You are all my dearest friends and family, and I thank you all so much for coming to be here. I'm just so sorry that it has come under these terrible circumstances. I set my empty glass on a coaster on the table. Somehow it was still important for me to appear unrattled, composed. The coaster was somehow still important. We all have to do what we all have to do for the love of our family, and you have all shown and proven that by being here right now. I love you all dearly, and I'm so sorry to have to share this terrible news with you at this time. I pretended to get choked up. Then I lowered my head and excused myself and went to my bedroom to get what I needed as my family broke out in open gasps and cries and barely restrained sobs and sorrows in the living room. I quietly slipped out the side door and drove my Mercedes AMG GT to St. Mary's Hospital. I parked it in a handicapped spot when I got there. I wouldn't be needing it any longer. I decided to leave it to my nephew Nicholas once I had a chance to meet with my lawyer. He was a good kid who just graduated from Penn State, and I knew he loved that car. He deserved it. I decided to set him up with some cash too, just to help him get started. You never know what life has in store for you. I certainly didn't, and that's how I ended up here, sitting in this small cell in the LA County Jail, spending Christmas Day all by myself, eating a bologna sandwich for dinner, or trying to anyway. I don't have much appetite. This is the first time in my entire life that I have spent Christmas alone. I will be on suicide watch for the next 48 hours, and after that, the wheels and gears of the legal system will make their slow and inevitable turns, and I will end up in Pelican Bay or San Quentin or someplace like that for the rest of my life. Murder 1, assault with a deadly weapon, menacing, illegal parking in a designated handicap space. Haha. They have me. They have me dead to rights. They have me on video for all of it. I don't care. It was unfortunate that I had to put down that security guard who tried to stop me from reaching Deputy Langtree's hospital room, though. I shot low in the center of his thigh. Hopefully he will be okay. Hopefully I missed the femoral artery. I tried my best, but it all happened pretty fast and I'm no marksman. It could have been worse, I guess. At least he was already in a level 1 trauma unit. Young guy. I feel bad about that part. They won't tell me anything about how he's doing, or if he has a wife and kids or anything like that. I hope he's okay. I will leave some money for him too once I meet with my lawyer and update my last will and testament, for whatever that might be worth. I don't know what else I can do. I just feel really bad about it. I never wanted to hurt anyone else. Anyway, they can't keep me on suicide watch forever. And like I said, we all have to do what we all have to do for the love of our family. I did what I had to do for the love of my family. I have no regrets. Anyone want the rest of this bologna sandwich? I'm not hungry. Merry Christmas. I think this one will probably be my last, but I hope you enjoy many more, engulfed in the warmth and love of all your family and friends. I just need to find a rope where time almost stands still. Okay, how do we start this story? We could start it with character descriptions. Nah, that's on you and your imagination. We could write a beautiful description of atmosphere and breathtaking elements. Nah, not going to happen. Then how? Fuck it, let's just go. Cole Johnson's entries. Day 104. I went to court today. It was some good, some bad. I was offered 24 years. That's good. I won't see Sally or my children for 8,760 days. That's bad. This is a decision I must absorb. My attorney says it's the best I will get and advises I take it. I won't. I did not do anything wrong. Today is chicken on the bone day, so I'm going to be quick in my documentation of my thoughts to you, world. Philip will be done working out soon, too. This place is so hard, but at least I have Sally's calls to look forward to. World, if you have an ounce of compassion, please forgive me. I did nothing wrong. As Cole finished his diary entry, he knew it was close to chow time, and he had his chicken already sold. It was a different kind of currency behind these walls. Instead of dollars and cents, it was items like soup and peanut butter. Chicken went for 5 soups, which was considered to be very expensive. We will talk about this again. Day 162. I talked to Sally today. She's so amazing. I really miss her caress, her lustful look that she always had when she gazed upon me. She had eyes that you could feel deep in your heart. They were inviting. I could see she was deep in thought about me, and I could almost reach into them and pull her soul into mine. We talked about our normal topics at first: bills, her work, our longing for each other. The one thing we never discussed was my crime or my potential sentence. I know what's coming, and she does as well. I told her how much I missed her. We recalled our first date for the 500th time, but it was a story that made us both smile and laugh. These memories were all we had now. Cole had to get 16 soups, 4 honey buns, and 2 bags of Doritos together. He had run up a debt, expecting Sally to help him with commissary. This debt was caused by the paper and pen he negotiated for, which was hard to acquire in this place. He wanted to write Sally letters, as well as his children. Although, there were other ways to earn items when you're broke. We will not get into that unpleasantness right now. Day 315. I finally acquired a pen. These golf pencils are only good for writing these entries, not really meant for the long letters I want to write for my children and Sally. Baby mama will no longer let the children take my calls, so getting this pen now was perfect timing. Question is, will the price I paid for it come back to haunt me? In here, debt is bad, so I don't know what will happen. I need to sell more spice, but I have been transferred to the 600 block, which is all pizza and folks that don't do drugs. Ugh, it's always something. I guess I will write my children. It has been over 60 days since we spoke. I really hope their mom reads these letters to my kiddos. Cole had procured that pen at a great cost, pretty much all of his commissary, so he had to reach out to others to try and get the funds so he could get more commissary. This was not on his top 10 list of favorite things to do. He would have to call his brother. His mother was just a poor waitress, so his only other option was his brother. Cole's mentality was changing inside those walls. Never before would he even have fathomed begging his brother. He always found a way to get things on his own. Now everything was different. He was dependent on help from outside these walls and barbed wire fences. Day 461. I am losing all love, it feels like. All I see is hate, greed, and controlled movements. The only thing I have anymore is Sally. She has been sick so much lately that she has not been able to help much. Our phone calls are spread out now and have become less frequent due to the financial burdens I bring. I am contemplating letting her go. We will never make love, touch, or even be allowed to see each other face to face given our great distance. She will never be able to afford that trip. Also, no letters from children. I am truly alone. People think they understand this world, but they don't. Why do I deserve this? What did I do? Cole is disappearing now. As the world got faster on the outside, in those walls, time almost stood still. Every day on the outside, new cars are bought, birthdays are celebrated, technologies are created, kisses are given and life is moving. In here, the most simple things cease to exist. Day 936. As I write to you, world, my soul is disappearing. How will I ever be able to come back into you? My beard is long, and I have encountered so many things I never knew one man could do to another. The sound of a man's last gasp of breath. Then he's gone. World, I still don't understand what my crime against you was. Why did I get put in here? What was my crime that was so bad that you felt all should be taken? The only light left for me is Sally. Her monthly call is enough to keep me from slipping into the dark abyss. She is to call at 6 p.m. I need to shower to prepare. I know she cannot see me, but I feel she does. She is my love, my life, my soulmate. Cole went to shower, and there was a group of men that was looking to retaliate for something he had no part in, but the fact he was there was good enough for them. It was a wrong place, wrong time type of deal. Day 966. World, as I write this entry, I can barely see due to the beating I took in the shower. I need your help. I missed my call with Sally. That's all I could think about as the four men repeatedly stomped my skull. I have been in the infirmary, and when I get out, I am looking at 60 days in the hole, because I won't say who jumped me. So, I sit here and write, which is all I have anymore. World, you're the only one who hasn't abandoned me. Can you hear me? All I need is a small sign to know that at least you are real. You and Sally are all I have. I need you, world. The beating Cole took was severe. It fractured his skull, broke 9 ribs, and put him in the infirmary for 30 days. Due to his silence, he was going to be put in isolation for 60 days. In here, someone always has to pay. However, the whole was a lighter sentence than talking. Talking would have meant his life. Day 1027. I'm back. My wounds are better. I'm still sore, but I'm better. I will never regain the teeth that I lost. Now, every day when I look into the mirror, reflective film, taped to the wall, I get reminded of that missed phone call. I tried all day to call Sally Collect, but it was not accepted. She probably found someone else. It's for the best. She deserves to move past me. I'm only a grim anchor in her life, dragging down her happiness. I guess it's just us now, world. Please send me some sign so I know you're really listening. I am so lonely now, world. Help me, so I do not become the hate that surrounds me all of the time. As Cole struggled, all communication with Sally ceased now. He was all alone. He knew now all control was gone. No word from his children, no nothing. He had only one choice now, to take the plea. He would never be able to prove his innocence. This was his life now. Day 1643. Well, it's time, world. I am taking the plea. 24 years, 8,760 days, 210,240 minutes, 12,614,400 seconds. I know now that the world, yes, you, will never forgive me. Even you have to let go of me. Now, it's only these walls, this disparity. The only thing I have to look forward to is being consumed into this life. I will never admit my guilt in my heart. You, world, have let me go, so I must live only here now and continue to survive. World, goodbye. This will be my last entry. I must kill the Cole Johnson of my previous life and become the Cole Johnson behind the walls. Years passed. Then one day, a graying Cole looked under his mattress to find the journal. He picked it up and began to read. He could only sit and weep as he read words that still had a sliver of hope and moments of joy. It was an emotion that Cole had not felt in a long time. Those feelings of hope, love, ambition, and the possibility of a future were all gone now. He was covered in tattoos, not because they were cool, but because they told his story behind these walls of who he was and what he had done. As Cole held that journal and looked into that so-called mirror, he didn't recognize the man looking back at him. It was only a shell of himself. He decided to write in that journal once again. Day 6142. Well, world, it's me again. I'm sure you don't remember me. I'm the man who killed that family at that intersection on Christmas Eve many years ago. Remember me now? Why did you abandon me, world? It has not been easy. I had to kill a man, and I have been sentenced to death by lethal injection. I have tried to write the one child that survived that fateful night long ago. He is older now, and I guess has moved on. He will probably never forgive me. He will never be able to hug his sister, mother, or father ever again. I will never be able to hold Sally again, and it hurts so much. My execution has been scheduled for next Tuesday. I guess this will be my last entry. World, please let the universe know that I am sorry, and hopefully you can find a cool section of hell for me. If I could only see my love just one more time, hug my children one last time. I know now that's not possible. I hope Johnny and Allison have forgiven me and had the life they deserve and are happy. As Cole prepared to be sent into the universe, a correctional officer came into his cell to give him his last meal. He also handed him a letter. Cole stood, hoping it was a farewell from his children, or maybe even Sally. As he looked at the envelope, and he was terrified to open it. He had not seen or felt for so long, and as he began to open it, the guard told him, "We found this letter in your property, Cole. We do not know why it was overlooked, and we all thought you deserved to have it." The correctional officer left, and as Cole opened it, he noticed it was old like him. It was from Sally. It read, "My dearest Cole, I know by the time you read this I will be gone. It turned out the reason I have been so sick lately was because of the aggressive cancer inside of me. The doctors have given me only weeks to live. I am so sorry, baby. I cannot stop it. I want to tell you how much I love you. I know someday we will be together in the stars. My love, I hope this letter finds you with compassion, not fear. Everything will be okay, Cole. Even in death, I will not let go of you. I will always watch over you, my Cole. Please forgive me for leaving you. I love you so much. The doctors are coming. If I am able, I will write you again as soon as possible. Love your soulmates, Sally." All Cole could do was fall to his knees. She was always with him. He thought he was talking to the world, but it was his Sally all along, just another dead girl underwater. Trigger warning: implications of death, violence, and sexual harassment. By the time the fisherman finds me, I will have been dead for 33 hours, 6 minutes, and 29 seconds. 18 hours since the police declared me missing. 15 hours since Zoe told my biology teacher that my tent was empty, that I hadn't returned from the party we'd snuck out to the night before. Careful, quiet, every twig a possible snitch. It was exhilarating, our hearts pounding, the smell of pine and seaweed thick in the air, and the moon a perfectly curved sickle. Zoe held my sweaty hand and didn't let go until we'd passed the tents and joined the others by the lake. The music on someone's phone was turned down just low enough for us to make out Billie Eilish's raspy voice. One of the guys offered us a beer, kept cool in the pitch-black lurking water. I remember thinking I couldn't tell where the lake ended and the forest began. The first article, published by a local newspaper, reads, "Promising high school student missing after night swim in lake." Shortly after, the Water Rescue Service and Fire Brigade take over the search. Dogs comb the area, their noses trailing through the damp earth. A human chain forms, people moving slowly through the woods, eyes scanning for any sign of me. Even a helicopter hovers overhead, its whirring blades slicing through the heavy, charged air. The search drags on for hours, stretching into the twilight, yet the woods remain silent. The police begin to ask questions. When was she last seen? What was she wearing? Had she been drinking? Did she seem out of character? Angry? Sad? Suicidal? No, and no. She was singing. She was dancing. She seemed happy. When the fisherman finds my body, miles away from where I was last seen, certainty sets in. The autopsy reveals a hematoma on my head and purple spots behind my ears. The coroners examine the water in my lungs and confirm that I wasn't dead before entering the water. I died by drowning. My classmates are questioned again. Zoe claims to have left early, while I stayed behind with her twin brother, Tom, who has been in love with me since middle school. Tom's behavior strikes the police as odd. He insists he barely spoke to me, despite people seeing us leave the party together for a few minutes. When my body is examined, traces of Tom's skin are found on my clothes, trapped between the fabric layers. Still, Tom sticks to his story, perhaps because the truth would embarrass him for some reason. Or maybe he's just afraid of the questions that would follow and the scrutiny that might come with them. Tom is right, in the broadest sense. We really only exchanged 3 or 4 sentences that night, but only because Tom's mouth was otherwise occupied with me. I had enjoyed every second of it, and looking back, I wish I'd given him a real chance. But I was too worried about what other people might think. So, as usual, I brushed him off, leaving him to walk away from the party feeling hurt. Cassandra insists she heard Zoe and me arguing that night, just before Zoe headed back to the campsite. According to her, we were fighting over Tom. Of course she would say that. What else would 2 girls argue about if not a boy? Cassandra even claims that Zoe pushed me, though Zoe denies it vehemently. She denies discussing Tom at all, insisting it was about something else, something that wouldn't come to light until much later, when our biology teacher became a suspect. But Cassandra holds firm to her version. The thing about Cassandra is that she's always been a shadow, the kind of girl whose name teachers forget after 2 weeks of spring break. Kelly, Cindy, Carrie, something with a C though, right? So, when she finally gets the chance to talk to the police and be part of the investigation, she jumps at it. Unfortunately, Cassandra isn't much help to the investigators. She leaves the party at 2 a.m., just 40 minutes before I die, leaving me alone with a group of guys who've brought along some tranquilizers. Sitting next to them felt like being stuck in a fever dream, where Jacques Derrida explains quantum physics at a frat party. At some point, I decided it was time to head back. One of the guys casually asked if I needed someone to walk with me, and I said yes, but no one moved. I glanced back, the campsite faintly visible through the cold, white light filtering through the pines. It was only a few meters away, just beyond the trees. I'd walked this path for days, never once feeling threatened by the shadows in the bushes. But tonight, that sinking feeling in my stomach wouldn't go away. Still, I refused to be that girl. The one who got scared at every creak in the dark. The one who needed someone to hold her hand for a few steps. So I stood up and said I'd walk alone. Instead of sticking to the dark trail, though, I decided to take a small detour along the riverbank, a bit longer, a bit lighter, and hopefully a bit safer. One of the guys told me to text him when I made it to my tent, but when I didn't, no one even noticed. 16 days after my death, suspicion begins to shift toward our biology teacher. Devin, one of my classmates, reveals that he had felt ill that night and went looking for the teacher's tent, only to find it empty. Soon after, the teacher's behavior takes a strange turn. He starts making inconsistent statements that don't add up. One day, he calls Zoe into his office after class, where he insists that his earlier proposal to her before the trip had been nothing but a joke. She understood that, right? It was sarcasm, he says, claiming that what he really meant was that if she wanted to improve her grades, she should consider attending a tutoring service. And this is where Cassandra steps in for the final time. She confesses that she visited our biology teacher after the party, and that they went to the boathouse, where, according to her, nothing bad happened. He was just there for me. The biology teacher is immediately suspended, but the case against him has nothing to do with mine, as Cassandra's alibi clears him. Meanwhile, the suspicions surrounding Zoe and Tom are too weak to pursue. My case remains unsolved, and eventually people begin to accept the idea that it was just a tragic accident, that I must have hit my head when I jumped into the water. They agree that I seemed unhappy, not just that night, but in general, and that my relationship with my parents, who expected me to excel in everything, was strained. Perhaps the pressure had finally got to her. It's all unsatisfying, of course. Unsatisfying for the local magazine, whose updates eventually dry up. Unsatisfying for the police, left with yet another unsolved case on their desk. Unsatisfying for my parents, who, decades later, will say in an interview that not a day goes by that they don't think of their little girl. Maybe one day, a classmate will write a college essay about my case, reflecting on how it taught them that life can end in an instant. Maybe my story will end up on a true crime podcast, or perhaps Netflix will stretch it into a tightly structured 8-episode miniseries where my body is discovered just 3 minutes in, enough time for viewers to decide if they'll keep watching. Or maybe none of this happens and I'll fade away, like countless other women who are silenced every day simply for being born the wrong sex. It doesn't matter who profits from my story. It doesn't even matter if they eventually find the 2 men I crossed paths with on my way back to the campsite, in the wrong place at the wrong time. None of this matters, because in the end, I'm just another dead girl underwater. Trial by egotism. The Honorable Judge Harold Brybar strode to the bench, bearing a coy smile. The court knew that smile well, as did millions watching on view screens all over Mars, as did tens of millions back on Earth who wouldn't get the feed for another hour or so. They also knew the arch of his thick gray eyebrows, the well-trimmed salt and pepper hair he'd gracefully let recede, the petite spectacles he wore when reading, and the mild way he cleared his throat to bring the whole courtroom to attention. In offense to all known theories of jurisprudence, Judge Harold Brybar was a celebrity judge, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. As Brybar sat down, he produced his legendary gavel from the folds of his cloak. It was the gavel that had sent General Sabrina Gallo to the slammer. It was the gavel that had brought justice to the ungrateful eight. It was the gavel that had, so mournfully, let the Scarlet Assassin walk on a series of technicalities. Years ago, a rookie reporter dubbed it the cinematic hammer of justice, and the moniker stuck. Though Brybar only laughed and shook his head ruefully when asked about the moniker, Chekhov would have surely side-eyed this fabled instrument of law and order. This should be the final day of the trial, Judge Brybar said after customarily clearing his throat. If Miss Tottle's statement runs long, We'll cut for lunch at 11. How long do you think you'll go? He flashed a smile at the defendant. An hour should do it. Marissa Towdle flashed a smile right back between lips stained dark red. She came to court in a maroon pantsuit with a long, matching jacket that almost reached the ground, and dark lipstick and fingernail polish to match. Stylish, but, for her, understated. Earlier in the trial, she'd favored brighter colors, including a pastel blue skirt that drew immense attention, much of it mockery in the press. She'd been on trial for previous burglaries and had proven as much a celebrity as the judge overseeing her case. That she'd taken to defending herself only heightened the circus atmosphere. You couldn't wish for a more theatrical combination of defendant and judge. Excellent, the judge said. That would mean the jury can deliberate over lunch. A smooth running ship at last. The assembled audience, standing room only, laughed nervously, revealing how much tension the courtroom held. In theory, Towdle should be guilty as a Labrador by a demolished birthday cake. She'd been caught red-handed in the most elaborate and movie-like theft in the history of the planet after all. But many speculated Towdle had a trick or two up her sleeve. Gambling websites gave her a 15% chance of acquittal and even a 5% chance of escape. The third prime participant in this drama feels ordinary by comparison. Veronica Brief charted a conventional path as she rose through the prosecutorial ranks. Top grades, hard work, schmoozing, ambition, and a photographic memory. There's little reason to elaborate on her story. Veronica had aimed for calm, efficient, and professional as her persona. She let Marissa and Judge Brybar provide the entertainment. The stately prosecutor drew little mention in the tabloids despite overseeing the case of the millennium. And she'd presented a good case, which was easy in one sense because of how strong the evidence was. Someone had stolen the twin pins of Mars, diamond-encrusted spikes that ceremonially finished the oxygen dome of the first Martian city. Marissa Towdle was a known high-stakes burglar and ex-con. She'd been present at the benefit concert from which the pins were stolen. She'd purchased the chemicals needed for the distracting foam bomb that had gone off at the concert. And most damningly, one of the diamond pins had been found in her very apartment. The list of witnesses and items in evidence is so long that, again, there's little need to go into much detail. The most troubling possibility was that if the jury liked Marissa too much, that they were simply so entertained, they might ignore the evidence and vote for acquittal. Today, the defendant would make her last appeal. Today, Marissa Towdle, who'd fired her lawyers after just 4 days into the proceedings, would make her closing argument. She wasn't a lawyer, had never been to law school, and committed innumerable mistakes of law throughout the trial. But she still possessed the supernatural confidence of a legendary burglar. So she'd plowed ahead, learned from each mistake of process, always found a way to laugh with the audience as she suffered a series of sustained objections against her. The red planet stood entranced, listening to how she would make her final plea. Marissa Towdle rose. She was quite short, but cut a dramatic figure nonetheless. She strode to the center of the room to address the jury. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my honored peers, good morning to you. Also, good morning to everyone watching in the live audience in this wonderful city of New Olympus and all across Mars and our sister planet of Earth. Also, a quick shout out to anyone reading the transcript in the future. That's serious dedication. Laughter. The prosecution has done a thorough job presenting the evidence against me, and I would be foolish to claim no fear. They found one of the diamond pins at my apartment. Can you believe my incredulity? Without that one piece of evidence, all they have is hearsay and circumstance. And who hasn't been hurt by hearsay and circumstance? I was sorely mistreated on the day they overturned my home. Veronica had decided early in the trial not to be surprised by anything Marissa said. Here she was, starting her final defense by bringing up the single strongest piece of evidence against her, submerging it in a strange cocktail of jokes and grievances. Still, she was as oddly compelling as she'd been the whole trial. "Have I mentioned how good you look, jury? The fall weather has really brought out your fashion sense. Such lovely browns and greens. I'm going to miss you all when this trial is finally over. And soon it will be over, won't it? Oh, I don't know if this is legal. Is it legal to compliment and reminisce with the jury?" "It is, if there's no objection from the prosecution." This was the judge, now looking in Veronica's direction with a raised eyebrow. All around the court, Veronica felt all eyes suddenly on her. And it was true. She could object for relevance or ingratiation, which Mars had added to the legal code 50 years ago. "No objection," Veronica said after a pause worthy of a sitcom, to titters and laughter from the audience. She hadn't intended to object at all, no matter how wild the defendant got. It's considered poor form to object during closing arguments, unless the faults are egregious. Plus, ordinary folks see through flattery and immaterial wanderings most of the time, and that should be especially so in this case. Marissa wasn't just on trial for grand theft, but also for assault. When she'd set off the foam bomb at the dedication ceremony, 3 people had been injured, and many dozens more might have been. These charges alone could add up to decades behind bars. A jury might excuse burglary if they liked a defendant, but harming innocent spectators? No way, Veronica thought. Marissa had avoided lengthy prison sentences from previous burglaries through clever negotiating, and because she'd always been careful to avoid violence. Now she might be mere hours from a lifetime in prison. How was she so calm? At this point, Marissa had moved on to a PowerPoint presentation with a selection of quotes projected onto the large screen across from the jury, with certain words highlighted for effect. The rotten witch made all the plans and said it would be an easy score without any risk of harm to anyone. That's what one of my supposed henchmen said about me, if you'll remember. I don't see why that insult was necessary. Read the next quote, this time from a witness who supposedly saw me outside the concert hall. She was laughing like a hyena, or like some evil witch. With the shouting inside, I could barely hear her, but I was close enough I could just make out the cackle. I could read each and every one of these quotes, each more demeaning than the last, but you can look over the full list if you've got the stomach for it. So many horrible things said about me, which I don't mind. I can accept taunts and jeers. But it is certainly interesting that so many of these witnesses couldn't help but include spiteful, disparaging remarks. And you'll notice how many bring out the W word. It almost feels like they were coordinating their testimony somehow. Veronica caught a glimpse of the jury. She read ambivalence on their faces, scowls, smirks, narrowed, focused eyes, and furrowed brows. They were all paying attention, but none appeared sympathetic, and only a few seemed amused. She found it galling that Marissa would imply misconduct from the prosecution. Early in the legal process, Marissa had tried to trade the location of the second diamond pin for legal protection, which Veronica would never have agreed to. Not leastwise because the police were convinced they could lean on her conspirators to produce the second pin, an assumption which, 7 weeks later, had not come true. Those negotiations were inadmissible at trial, but made Marissa's attempts to cast the prosecution as corrupt all the more preposterous. Marissa knew she was guilty, and knew the prosecution knew she was guilty. And then there's the matter of the diamond pin of peace, found in my apartment, right under my very bed. It's the linchpin of the case against me. But do you find that likely? That a supposed master criminal would conceal the single most damning evidence in the most obvious and cliched place to hide something? And that underscores my next point, that the diamond pin of prosperity is yet to be found. If I had stolen them both, why hide one in an obvious place, then another where the police have yet still to find? I'm not going to accuse anyone else of being the real thief, and therefore the person who planted the evidence while keeping half the spoils for themselves, not right at this moment anyway. I don't have the resources of the police or prosecutors to chase leads and likely suspects. But how can you not be suspicious of these circumstances? Marissa had raised her voice by this point. Despite her grandiosity, she'd kept her tone civil, even playful. But now she strode about the floor, her jacket swirling in great red arcs. She turned to the prosecution table and approached Veronica, though even with her heels, she stood barely a few inches taller than her adversary, sitting up straight. Marissa leaned over the table between them. Veronica held her gaze in as steely a manner as she could muster. She wasn't intimidated, but feared smiling at this bit of theatrics, which might send the wrong message to the jury. They've stacked things so thoroughly against me. A huge team of cops and prosecutors, all working to dig up evidence. 3 of my friends called to testify against me. Hundreds of hours of security video. Reams of texts stolen from my phone. All this effort searching for any slip-up, inconsistency, or wrong place, wrong time circumstance. And in the end, their whole case rests on a single, dubious discovery. Marissa whirled on Veronica, her jacket cape swirling like a tornado. She approached the judge, held his eye contact for many moments. Veronica couldn't read her face with her back turned, but Judge Brybar's eyes narrowed, turning from amused to suspicious to worried. Only then did worry enter Veronica's own mind. Could Marissa really have a grand plan to turn the trial on its head, or even to escape? Everyone in this courtroom stands against me. I've been fighting every official and advocate aligned for a single purpose. These whole 7 weeks I've fought. She stood right before the judge now, a dark red fingernail pointed but a meter from his face. Control yourself, the judge warned, his voice steady. Marissa slowly retreated her hand to her chest, but kept the finger out. Then she approached still further and placed her hands on the edge of the bench. Judge Brybar screwed his face up in an apoplectic grimace. I kindly ask you to back away, the judge said with barely concealed rage. And Marissa did so. She turned slowly, her jacket an eddy rather than a hurricane. The whole audience appeared to exhale at this drawdown in tension. The calm wouldn't last. The true thief, the true mastermind, is in this courtroom right now. Marissa raised her hand, extending that damning index finger clad in crimson, thrusting it high in the air like the barrel of a smoking gun. The courtroom turned deathly quiet. Marissa twirled her finger in the air. Once, twice. A woman screamed in the audience. Several people stood. Veronica noticed the judge fumbling for his gavel. Why was his gavel not to hand? Veronica's photographic memory went to work, rewinding to a minute prior. The gavel had disappeared from the moment Marissa had placed her hands on the bench. When she'd made that dramatic turn, she must have... Approach, Your Honor? Veronica called out, but was drowned out by the growing tumult of the audience. She stood and shouted, Approach, Your Honor. Your gavel. She has your gavel in her sleeve. The chaos intensified, cries and laughter mixing together. Judge Brybar's eyes were wide as Phobos and Deimos in the Martian night sky. The bailiffs stood frozen for a moment, but one caught Veronica's eye. They nodded at each other and sprung into motion. Veronica charged. She couldn't say why, necessarily. But the thought entered her mind that perhaps this was a grand distraction to allow Marissa some clever escape, and that was just too much of an affront to the seasoned prosecutor. It was a breach of decorum to get involved in bailiff duties, but Veronica had been a track athlete in college and had taken basic police training, and there was so much energy in the courtroom. The bailiff, a stocky woman with a tight ponytail, whose expression almost never changed. Her name was Lawrence, Veronica wanted to say, got there first and held Marissa under the arms. Marissa was making a show of struggling without really struggling, calling her capture a brute. Veronica held Marissa's eye contact while she riffled in her sleeves, producing the lost gavel within seconds. "I believe this belongs to you," she said, with what she hoped was cinematic showmanship, as she cast the gavel onto the bench. Adjourned. Adjourned. Take the defendant into custody. The judge had retrieved the cinematic hammer of justice and was banging it on the bench like a woodpecker. Slowly, the veins in his forehead receded as the bailiffs took Marissa away. Next, the judge leaned down to whisper to Veronica, "Meet me in chambers. I fear we're looking at a mistrial." Of course, a mistrial. Was that Marissa's plan? But how would this help her? More chances to escape, maybe, but then she'd surely earned tighter security from this fiasco. She'd wait in prison for the next trial, and the evidence against her would be as strong as ever. Why had she done this? Why had she made such a scene? But then, she'd so loved playing the lawyer, stirring up drama and having all eyes on her. These last 7 weeks may have been the most exciting of an already legendary life. With this performance, Marissa Towdle hadn't earned her freedom, but she'd earned another shot at being the center of the known universe. Easy money. Debbie said that it was lucky for us that the weather would make for fewer people on the roads, less chance we'd be seen. 25 freaking degrees. I do not like the cold. This will be the first time I've ever done anything with Randy. This thing was his idea, I think, but it was Debbie that brought me into it. There's $6,000 to be had, and it sounds like no problem having it, if you don't mind robbing some old lady, which I don't. This weather is awful, though. They're always predicting snow, but we don't usually get any. When we do get it, it's pretty, covering up the trash on the ground, making the town look better than it really is. So, Debbie told me about this, and then has Randy tell me the details. We're planning on tricking this old lady, but they don't really have a handle on how to do it. We're going to tell her they're from the city, tell her they need to look inside her house. Randy looks like a teenager, and Debbie's a girl. They need me to be the man from the city. I told them I had a blue shirt with badges on it. It had belonged to my brother Danny, who's doing time in the state penitentiary, back when he worked for the city. I've got his van, too, and it's plain white like a service vehicle. Debbie was Danny's girlfriend before he got locked up. Now she's Randy's. She ought to be my girlfriend because I'm a lot more like Danny than Randy will ever be. But I get it. Randy is smart, and Debbie wanted somebody who was not like Danny. So, we got this plan. It's Randy's plan, but we're all in on it. I have a gun. It's a gun Uncle Terrell gave me when I was a kid. It's a .22, but it works. Randy said not to bring it, but I really want to have it with me. You can never tell what might go wrong. What if this old lady has a gun? Did he ever think about that? So, I got the shirt and my van. We got what we need. This morning, we went back over what to do. We go to the old lady's house at a little after 12. Traffic in town is busy, but this place is outside of town. It's on a street that zigzags off from the highway toward Atlanta. I drive up in front of the house, parking so that she can see the white van if she looks out the window. I get out and go up to the door with Debbie behind me. Debbie is going to be wearing a big coat, and I'm going to say she's my trainee. First, though, I have to tell the old lady that there's been a problem with her electric bill and that she's being charged too much. The city is sending me to fix it. I'm gonna tell her. She opens the door, because who wouldn't want somebody to fix it so that a bill is lower? And that's when I tell her who Debbie is supposed to be. I'm asking the old lady where the kitchen is, because this problem is probably at the outlet the refrigerator is plugged into. When she starts to take me there, Debbie asks if she can use the bathroom. While I'm in the kitchen, Debbie goes to the old lady's bedroom. Randy says the money is in the bottom drawer of her Chester drawers. I keep the old lady busy till Debbie comes to the kitchen. Then I make like I fixed the problem, and we leave. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. The old lady won't know she's been robbed. The next time she looks for the money and it's gone, she won't think that it might have been the city electric guy. She's old. If she does remember us, she sure as hell won't remember what we looked like. Randy says there's about $6,000 there. I'm like, how do you know? He says the old lady is Dexter Lockwood's granny, and Dexter told him. We gotta give Dexter some of the money? Randy says no, that Dexter is stupid, and just told this without thinking up the plan himself. Randy is staying in the van while Debbie and me go inside. With the weather as cold as it is, it wouldn't be a good idea to turn the thing off and just hope it will start when we get back. It's usually reliable, but in this weather, I don't know. I'm leaving it running with Randy inside, out of sight, and damn, it is snowing. So, I drive a little slower on the way, looking around to see how many cars are out, and since the snow just started, there's quite a few. We get to the house and it's not what I was expecting. I thought it would be something pretty nice, but it's not. It's a little bit bigger than the shotgun houses in Milltown, but not by much. There's a carport full of junk and the Plymouth in the driveway looks like it hasn't moved in a while. I asked Randy if he was sure this was the place, and he said that he was. I parked on the street and looked over at Debbie. She's a pretty girl, but the kind of pretty girl that knows she's pretty. The coat she was wearing had a fur collar that she pulled up to cover a good bit of her face. She said, "Here we go." Part 2. Debbie. When Steve pulled up in front of the house, I could tell that he was scared, and it wasn't just because of the snow. He was dim in the head like his brother Dennis, but Dennis wasn't scared of anything. That's why he was locked up. A little bit of scared can be a good thing. It keeps you from being foolish. Randy and I had gone over the plan a good bit before we got Steve involved. He had the shirt and the plain white van. He was too dumb to send in alone. Somebody needed to go with him to be sure he didn't screw it up. While we're going over the plan, Steve started talking about having a gun he wanted to bring with him. Randy said no. A gun would change all of this. We would go from basically pulling a scam to maybe getting charged with assault with a deadly weapon of an old lady. I'm scared that Steve brought it anyhow. So, it's below freezing, and the snow has started to stick. I didn't say anything though. We needed to be focused on what we were doing because this was $6,000. 2 for each of us. I could last 6 months on $2,000 if I was careful. And I was careful. I'm not mentioning that until we get this done. I want my money, and then I'm done with Randy, and with Steve, and with Dennis. When he stopped the van in front of the house, I could see Steve starting to freak out a little. I didn't want him to spend too much time thinking, so I just looked at him and said, "Here we go." I got out of the van and started around. Randy got in the driver's seat. We went to the door and knocked. The old lady opened it right away, like she had been standing there waiting for us. She's tiny. I mean, I'm only 5'2" myself, but she's shorter than me. A tiny little old lady. "Can I help you?" Steve stutters a little, but manages to say, "We're here about your bill. Has it been too high lately?" "What bill?" she says. "The electric bill," he says. "Has your electric bill been too high?" "It's high," the old woman says, just like any other old woman would have said about any other bill. The old lady is tiny, but she's mad, staring at him right in the eye. "Let me come to your kitchen," Steve says. "I can show you what the problem is." "I need to go to the bathroom," I say, but the old lady doesn't hear me. The old lady looks at me and says, "They got to send 2 of you to look at it?" Steve is in over his head. "Let me come to your kitchen," he says. The old lady's hackles are up big time, and I can see she's not scared. She knows we're trouble, and she's not going to let us in. I say again, "I need to go to the bathroom." "I can show you where the problem is, and I can fix it and save you some money," Steve says, and he sounds desperate saying it. I could see where this was heading. She would slam the door and call the police, and even if we didn't get caught, there wouldn't be any money. That was for damn sure. I shoved past Steve and pushed the old lady backwards. I thought she would fall, but she didn't. She staggered a step, and I was inside. I spun her around and pushed her face first into the sofa. I didn't want her looking at us any more than she already had. I could hear Steve snatching drawers open in the next room. I'm thinking the jerk doesn't remember where the money is. Randy had said specifically that it was in the bottom drawer in a cardboard box under some old nightgowns. Why the hell could he not find it? I hear him cussing then. He comes out and says, "Debbie, you're going to have to come and look for it." I can't find it. Idiot! Names! Now the old lady knew my name at very least. By then he was beside me, leaning into the old woman himself, holding her there. I got up and went to the bedroom and saw that he had ransacked it. The room straight across the hall was a little bathroom. There was one other door still closed. I went to it. I opened the door, expecting to find a different bedroom, the right bedroom, but instead, it's piled high with boxes and crap. Her junk room. "Damn it," I said. I went back to the front room where Steve continued to hold the old lady down. I leaned down to her and said, "Where is your money?" "I don't have any money," she said. Steve started to let her up, and it made me so mad that I slapped his head. He leaned back into her. "You do. We know about it. It's supposed to be in the bottom drawer of your Chester drawers in a box. Now where is it?" She said, "My Christmas money?" "Yeah," I said, wondering if she thought we wouldn't take it if she called it that. "It's gone. I spent it." Now I was mad. How did Randy get such bad information? What the hell were we going to do now? Finally, I said, "You must have started saving up again for next Christmas. Where's that at?" "In my sewing room," she said. I didn't say anything to that. "The sewing room," she said. "I heard you opening doors. I know you went in there." "The room with the boxes?" "Yeah, I keep it in one of the boxes in there." "Which one?" She started describing where it was, but I thought there was no way I was going to go in there and find it, even with her description. There was crap everywhere in that room. "Bring her down here, Jeff," I said, heading down the hall and expecting Steve to understand that I was referring to him. Again, it took 2 beats for him to catch on. He held the old woman by the back of her neck, pushing her in front of him. I pulled my coat up high enough that she couldn't get a good look at my face. When she got inside the room, she went to a stack of boxes and moved them around, finally pulling out one that looked, to me at least, like every other box in the room. She fumbled and opened it as we stood behind her. Part 3. Randy. There was supposed to be $6,000 in the box. If anything, I thought there might be more. I told Debbie about it, hoping she could talk Steve into doing the actual theft. Her idea was better because she knew about the official-looking shirt. I didn't want to deal with Steve. He was stupid. This needed to be simple, not simple-minded. Debbie planned it well. None of us knew how the weather would be that day. The temperature had been around freezing for a few days. Then it dropped into the 20s, and then it started to snow. I thought about calling it off, but I didn't want to lose Steve. We could do this. Debbie had Steve practice everything he was going to say and do. She walked him through it over and over, until we were all bored to death by it. The main thing was to say he was from the city, and that there was a problem with the electricity, and he could fix it and save her money. Once they were inside, the whole thing would take 2 or 3 minutes. I thought the shirt would be enough to make Steve look like a utility worker. It wasn't. He looked like a doofus wearing a work shirt. It was too late for me to say anything to him or Debbie. We were committed to the plan by then. I looked at him and wanted to ask if he had brought his little gun with him, but I didn't. I just wanted to hurry and get this over with. When we got there, Steve is like a raccoon caught in a car's headlights, and I think, damn, we are done for. I thought about pulling the plug, but I didn't. I should have, but I didn't. Debbie came through, getting him out of the van and headed toward the house. I watched them till they got to the door, and I realized how much snow had fallen. Maybe 5 minutes passed before I heard the gunshot. That son of a bitch had brought a gun after I told him not to. He fired again, and I thought, dumb bastard has killed her. I was already out of the van, which I had left running and with the door open, and was running toward the house. I can hear Debbie crying, and I know it's because she just watched that fool kill the old woman. The door pops open and Debbie comes staggering out, doubled over. I grab her shoulders and raise her up. There is a widening red patch at her stomach that I don't want to look at too closely. I put my arm under her and help her to the van. I can't very well drive her to the hospital and explain that our partner accidentally shot her while we were robbing an old lady. And I can't walk away from that situation either, I realize. I opened the side door and laid her down. This is messed up, I said. She didn't say anything back. I ran back to the little house, knowing that neighbors might have heard the gunshots and called the police. I needed to get Steve and the money and get the hell away and figure out what we needed to do about Debbie. I didn't want to see the dead old lady. I didn't. As soon as I got inside, I yelled, "Steve!" There was no answer. I went down the little hall and looked in the bedroom, but no one was there. I started into the junk room, but I fell, slipping in blood on the floor. My feet slid from under me, and I went down hard, banging my head on the floor. Someone spoke my name. I turned my head and saw Steve lying on the floor beside me. Blood throbbed slowly from his neck. He was not dead, but he would be soon. I heard my name again and looked up to see the old woman standing above me, her face filled with anger and sadness. "Randy," she said. Then I saw that she was holding the old Colt pistol that had belonged to my grandfather. I didn't realize she still had it. I should have, but I didn't. "Hey, Grandma," I said. "The horseman." The man on the horse was an odd one. I could tell that even as he angled his quarter horse into my beams like it was his turn in the center ring. An Easterner, which maybe 10 years earlier might have seemed even odder. Little dressier than the average rancher, handled his animal like he knew how, but had learned it someplace else. "Saw you from the rise," the man said. Easterner, all right. Kind of horse-faced fella with a government haircut and a big nose that reminded me of the Jew families that had passed through the dust and winds in Pop's tourist camp on their way to California. Not that I gave a damn. Pop hadn't given a shit about God after he took Ma in 32, and so he likewise didn't give two shits about anybody's private dealings with the Lord with or without Jesus. No, it was the man's eyes. Big, calm, curious. "Do you need some assistance?" My old Nash 400 was running like a top on 4 threadbare but plump tires, and the trunk was flung open with the jack still clamped into place. And then there was the Indian blanket I'd got in trade for some janitor work at the last gas before the next last gas on the way to my pot of gold that had turned into a cesspool about 2 hours ago. Oh, and the shovel lying next to the blanket rolled tight like a Tulsa oil man's stogie on the dirt under the lip of the trunk. Even without Jesus putting his 2 cents in, it wasn't the way I'd been raised. But like I said, it was the eyes, unblinking even in my headlamps, and that slow smile he gave me as I pulled Pop's old Colt out of my belt and made him a third eye, like I'd done him the biggest favor in the world. I'd settled in Espanola a couple years after the Depression ended, though, or maybe cause I'd helped the town undertaker put a number of such folks under the shifting Oklahoma topsoil for a few pennies a body, I'd sought out someplace a little more off the path of men, desperate or stupidly hopeful enough to drag their wives and young ones through the valley of death to a pot of gold that didn't exist. But everything shrinks as we grow, my pop once said, and it wasn't too long until they started to trickle south off the California Trail into the desert. College types, engineers, they said, Easterners, Jews, I heard, and more than a few foreigners who weren't fooling anybody with names like Henry Farmer and Nicholas Baker. Now, I'd never been out of Oklahoma before Pop's lungs finally gave out, and I dug one last grave this time for free, and I'd sure as shootin' never met any Germans. As at the time we had an axe to grind with Mr. Hitler, I was a sight more than nervous about the funny voices with the funny names sidling up beside me at the local watering hole on a Saturday night. Didn't help that the government had bought out the ranch school and put me out of the first steady work I'd had since sorting the dead from Pop's barely paying guests. The school and its high-flown Eastern teachers and rich folks' kids playing cowboy seemed a bit silly to me, but groundskeeper's pay was decent, and the Ponces treated me right. Felt no desire to stick around afterwards, even with the new jobs the government and their engineers were bringing to the area. What the Easterners and foreigners specifically were doing may have been the best-kept secret in the Southwest, but the tighter you keep the lid on the pot, the bigger the mess when things boil over. All anybody could guess was it had to something to do with that aforementioned scrap with Der Fuhrer, but folks got rattled with the army and the federal suits, cleverly watching every move the locals made. Bad enough, they were keeping Nazi prisoners and Japanese folks from California on ice down south at Fort Stanton. Seemed passing strange we weren't rounding up Germans and Italians who could blend right in at any military base or shipyard, but my 2 cents wasn't going to buy me anything but trouble, especially these days. The Denver and Rio Grande Western had ripped out the Chile line and pulled the tracks from Espanola in 42, but the town was hanging on between the nearby farms and the new government jobs 10 miles to the west. I was a handy sort with nowhere really to go, so I hung on too, in what passed for the middle of nowhere. If you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. I think that's in the Old Testament, or maybe some tourist dropped that pearl on me on their way to the new promised land. as I now headed the opposite direction, back through Espanola and north past Taos into the mountains near the Colorado border, I could feel God's jeering presence. Poor time to get religion, with 2 bodies stuffed in the trunk and a ticket to hell waiting at the station for me. When I think about it, and believe you me, I have, maybe that's precisely the time. I put them deep in the Carson forest. It was a skill I thought I'd put behind me. But even the dead can surprise you. I was in my bed a few hours before dawn, contemplating and shivering on the bare mattress. It was sheep country. I could get a new blanket in the morning, though at this moment I wasn't sure of the need. Barring rattlers, the horse was the only one got off free that night. Hitler willingly gave up his ghost in the spring of '45, and his pal Mussolini got a date with a firing squad and a public showing strung up like the day's catch outside a Milan filling station. It took close to 3 more years to rein in Hirohito. After destroying the Japanese Navy and taking a string of Pacific islands, hemming the empire in nice and neat, we rained fire down on Tokyo, Osaka, Hiroshima, and Fukuyama. I say we, although I spent most of my stint with the 124th Transportation Battalion in Luzon, up to my elbows in axle grease and sweat. I'd signed up 2 months after that night in the forest, reasoning only more blood would wash away what was on my hands and my soul. I was pretty much nobody in the middle of nowhere, and when no GIs or Eastern-looking fellows in suits and badges showed up on what passed for my doorsteps, I figured Uncle Sam had chalked things up to Nazi spies, or an unlucky turn on a dark plateau trail, or maybe Junior, as I'd come to call him, just bugging out. It was those goddamned eyes. He seemed like a man looking for a back door out of purgatory. Wonder if the sergeant at the Santa Fe recruiting office spotted anything like that in my bloodshot brown eyes. See, thing with being nobody, having nobody in the middle of nowhere is the company you're forced to keep. Nobody was ever likely to find the bodies, and nobody was likely ever going to spill a tear over the man who'd soiled my good blanket. But every time I listened to the bodies piling up on the radio, I wondered how many others I'd buried. Just what was it that midnight horseman had been up to at the old ranch school, with his army of eggheads with phony names and their army keeping the whole town under wraps? And why did most of the lot just pull up stakes a few weeks after? Had to be some kind of secret weapon, blow the Krauts and the Japs off the map, my guess? For one bleary moment, I thought my brain had contracted TB and an Irish brogue, but it was one of the Denver and Rio Grande Western's Gandy dancers who'd lost a knee and his toes and the works in between to a 3 p.m. coal car maybe 15 years ago. It hadn't broke him of the whiskey. He read too many of those cheap detective magazines with the gumshoes and masked crusaders and flying saucers and half-naked women about to be sawed up, or worse, and I'd had my wits about me. I'd have heard him creaking down the planks and cleared my stool. "And what makes you think that?" I asked, 'cause it was the noise I needed. "My sister's boy. He does some plumbing and odd jobs for them mad scientists down the road," the old man wheezed. "Seems like everybody's in an uproar over the boss fella gone missing a few weeks back. Seem to think there's spies all about, Nazis or commies or some such. Young Danny happened down the wrong hall, and the soldier boys there grilled him near to medium well." "Boss?" My voice went up a couple notches, but he was too stewed to notice. "Some Jew scientist from California supposed to be grand muckamuck of the whole operation. Jingleheimer, Weisenheimer, something like that. Some of the talk is, this Jew might be the spy." He leaned in on the half-leg and grabbed my sleeve as a thick cloud of coffin varnish sent me reeling back. "Now, you think about it, boyo. Why you think every man-jack's knickers are in such a knot? Lest something big was in the works. You ever hear of Adams?" You know, the stuff what we're all of us made of. Well, I hear tell Hitler and his boys have found a way to split them atoms, to just rip all of creation apart. Unless we get there first and blow the fella to hell first. Little wonder them Nazis would want to rub out Dr. Jingleheimer. He then toppled from his stool. I caught him halfway to the floor, jostled him back into place, and made for the door. Crisp desert night outside, the moon too close and stars scattered across the black, nothing like atoms torn asunder. I jumped in the Nash, somehow made it alive back to my shack, and packed for my penance. Recently leaked revelations allege the U.S. Defense and State Departments largely falsified published reports that Nazi Germany and Russia were on the verge of harnessing atomic fission as a potential weapon against America and its European allies, purportedly to spur Allied physicists to escalate development of such an atomic bomb to bring about a speedier surrender by Hitler's forces. That effort, referred to as the Manhattan Project, was conducted under a nearly impenetrable cloak of military security on the site of a former boys' academy near Los Alamos, under the auspices of preeminent theoretical physician J. Robert Oppenheimer. Without revealing the nature of his work, Oppenheimer's mysterious disappearance late one night in 1944 sparked a massive manhunt, and rumors the eccentric scientist had collaborated either with the Germans or the Russians, given his wife and brother's ties to the American Communist Party. The case remains open to this day, and the Manhattan Project ended shortly after Adolf Hitler's suicide and the effective fall of his Nazi regime. Amid the loss of one of its most brilliant minds and fears of further security breaches, the remaining physicists of Los Alamos declared the project a failure. Or so we thought. I talked this week with Isidore Isaac Rabi and David L. Hill, former Manhattan Project researcher. In a 60 Minutes exclusive, Rabi and Hill reveal for the first time that they and other project scientists concerned about the long-range implications of atomic warfare conspired to conceal their findings from the military. Rabi, Dr. Oppenheimer himself voiced doubts about the sanity of releasing such a force into the world, but he was under intense pressure to beat Hitler, beat Stalin to the punch. None of us knew we alone held the keys to a Pandora's box, but without Robert's zeal, we reached a hard but crucial decision. There are questions which illuminate, and there are those that destroy. I was always taught to ask the first kind. The only answer to the question of the day was destruction. If not merely the instantaneous vaporization of entire cities and the then unquantified after effects of ambient radiation, then the geopolitical stranglehold and atomic arms race between the US, Russia, perhaps even the former People's Republic of China would impose upon the human race. And imagine if such a weapon were deployed. There would be no defense, no deterrence, only annihilation. Rabi was awarded the 1944 Nobel Prize for his discovery of nuclear magnetic resonance, a major breakthrough in medical imaging and diagnosis, and his work in microwave technology revolutionized military and commercial radar systems and led to the introduction of the home microwave oven in the mid-1950s. Meanwhile, following the dissolution of the Manhattan Project, project team member David Hill headed up the Federation of American Scientists, later to become the Global Federation of Responsible Scientists, with the overthrow of Joseph Stalin and subsequent collapse of communism across Russia, Eastern Europe, and Northern China. Under Hill's leadership, the Federation worked with the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission and other international agencies to design virtually fail-safe atomic reactors, which have all but replaced coal-fired power facilities and have been credited with greatly reducing air pollution around the planet. We reached Dr. Hill at his Santa Fe home. Hill continues to defend Oppenheimer's patriotism and loyalty, as he has since President Truman branded the missing physicist a traitor in league with communist factions. Hill. The consensus was that the specter of atomic warfare and destruction would come to eclipse any prospect of science in the public interest. We've harnessed the power of the atom to save lives and provide clean, safe energy. I posit we'd never have put men and women on Mars, nor developed a seamless worldwide web of satellite communications and technology had we created a world occupied solely with averting global apocalypse. Wallace. Not everyone concurs with your assessment. Retired Major General Boris Pash, who headed up the investigation into Oppenheimer's disappearance in 1944, argues you and your colleagues withheld vital scientific information that might have ended the war 4 to 5 years earlier, saving, in his words, countless American and civilian Japanese lives. And to this day, Pash believes Oppenheimer was complicit either in your deception or acts of espionage. He's pushing the Justice Department to bring formal charges against what he called the Manhattan conspirators. Your response? Hill. Mr. Wallace, I'd invite you to imagine a football stadium filled to the rafters with all those American, British, Australian, Russian, Japanese casualties. Then imagine dropping a bomb that would wipe out an area 5, 10, 100 miles around that stadium. Then look ahead at the radioactive wastes that would linger in the air above that area for months, possibly years, that might carry across 100, possibly thousands of miles. Multiply that by as many bombs as it might take to prove we mean business. As for Dr. Oppenheimer, you have to understand the exhaustion and stress we were all under. Robert's way of dealing with that pressure, his doubts about the work and its consequences, was to ride the mountain trails around Los Alamos, through the Sangre de Cristo and the Jemez mountain ranges. He loved New Mexico, and he loved his horses. We were on the verge of a key breakthrough at that point, and he vanished shortly after supper. Most of us knew where he'd probably gone, and when they found his horse wandering around the plateau about 3 miles off, we figured he'd met up with some kind of misadventure. Dr. Oppenheimer would never have let that animal to languish in the wilds. That was something General Groves and his men would never understand. It was a small item on the Sunday news feed, but the Tao's byline had caught my eye. A massive flash flood had uncovered, and a trio of hikers had discovered what looked to be the skeletal remains of 2 adult males, one wrapped in the shreds of a decomposed wool blanket. A couple ribs shattered by one bullet, another bullet found rattling around in his companion's punctured skull. They'll surprise you, all right. And with them, the rest comes surging back. The soldiers, the flyers, the privates and colonels and generals, the moms and dads and sons and daughters caught in the Spitfire, the moms and dads and sons and daughters snared in limbo merely for being the face of the enemy, or a fair enough approximation. The odd horseman with the tortured eyes who'd suffered such indignity and injustice for taking a midnight ride. I'd taken a single souvenir that night in the forest, secreted it away to the Pacific on the second great California migration to find that golden pot in the airplane plants and the aeronautics trade. Tucked it in a bedroom drawer through a marriage, 2 sons, a funeral, and 2 graduations. Buried it deep packing for that one final job far, but not far enough away. Now, it seemed, was the time. It had been a tough week in the field, and I'd hoped to catch the satellite feed of 60 Minutes and maybe Columbo, but this finally seemed the time. I set the yellowing badge, number 76, I guessed how the brass kept track of their college boys, on top of the TV monitor, trying not to look in those damnably damned eyes this time. Bye, JR. Then I wrote this for you. whoever you wind up being. You can see the right people get it. Then I think I'll step out for a bit of air. The desert is beautiful at night, especially in the high beams of a double moon, in too deep. Sean sat alone in a dark confession booth, fighting back his tears. The mesh slat to his right took the shape of the crucifix. A door clicked open, and light shone through the slat, before vanishing as the door shut. "I wondered if I would see you again," said the priest, sitting beyond the divider to Sean's right. The devil sat on his left. "Read it to me one more time, Father," Sean said. The voice that spoke through the crucifix was soft. "I would be more help if you just told me." "Please, Father, don't. Just read me the passage." There was a slight shuffle of papers, and the priest began. "Forthwith Judas came to Jesus and said, 'Hail, Master,' and kissed him. Then they came, laid hands upon Jesus, and took him." Without a word, Sean left. Moonlight spilled across the Liffey while the sound of beer bottles clattering carried from the other side of the river. Sean meandered with his hands stuffed in his coat pockets, while his breath fogged in the cold air. A set of headlights crept from behind, casting his shadow lankly across the cobblestone. "Finn," called a hushed voice from behind. "Finn, where the heck have you been? I've been looking all over for you." Sean tensed, not wanting that name to follow him. Not tonight. He turned and held up a gloved hand, blocking the car's light. All he could see was the shadow hanging out of the driver's window, but he recognized the voice. It was his handler. "Christy?" "Feck's sakes." Christy stepped out of the car and closed the door, the sound loud in the quiet street. He paced over to Sean and they walked together. Sean sighed. "I'm sorry I had to..." "See the fecking priest again?" Christy touched Sean's shoulder and continued. "Finn, it'll be all right, lad. We're almost there. 5 years of hard work and it's all about to pay off." He released a large breath. The vapor rose and faded. "Feels longer." "Aye." Sean knew the question was coming and wondered whether Christy genuinely cared about his visit to the priest, or if he was simply trying to maintain a sense of familiarity. 5 years, and Christy was the only one from the outside Sean was allowed to contact. He'd requested a therapist, and Christy had come back a month later with the response, "Can't, lad. Too risky. Anything you need to get off your chest, you tell me." How could he tell Christy he wanted out of the gig? After 5 years of being deep undercover within the largest criminal gang in Ireland, how could he share his doubts now? "So," began Christy, "the question, the reason he was here, incoming, have they told you who you're going to whack?" Sean walked over to the river's railing and placed his hands upon it. "Neil," he muttered. "What?" "No," he said. "Don't be so hard on yourself. The guard's never going to let one of their own commit murder, not even to off some degenerate." Sean nodded. "As soon as you know anything, and I mean anything, location, victim, accomplices, you let me know and I'll pass it on. Conspiracy to commit murder. That's all we need. Besides, I shan't be hard to find. I'm stuck chauffeuring around the old Belle and Michel. God knows I want to put that cranky so-and-so in cuffs myself. All right?" Sean nodded again. The truth lay on his tongue, involved in a bitter feud with a lie. "Christy," he said as his handler headed back to the car. Christy turned, the headlights again shining and making him appear like an obscure shadow. "You right?" Sean opted for the truth. "Tomorrow. The hits tomorrow." The next day, Sean met Liam, Michial's son and Sean's unwitting informant, at the Gaelic Warrior Boxing Club. The 6 a.m. session stunk to high heaven with sweat, while the sound of dozens of gloves smacking pads filled the large shed. Sean climbed the steps onto the main ring where Liam watched Patrick, the bullman Doherty, a young gun who eyed the world title. "Finn," said Liam, "what's the crack?" They clapped hands and embraced. The first thing Sean wanted to do was to ask about the hit, but he was well practiced in pretending to be someone he wasn't, so he kept his conversation cordial, waiting for Liam to bring it up. "How's he going?" Sean asked, gesturing at the bullman, who was busting a sharp combo on his trainer's pads. Liam tilted his head, a habit usually reserved for discussing drug trafficking, and muttered, "He's got talent, but he's a bit of a hothead. I should get him in with you, teach him how to stay calm." "Calm?" Sean laughed. "I don't remember being calm. I just remember being belted." "Nonsense," said Liam. "I didn't take you on 'cause you can scrap. I manage hundreds of boxers. They can all do that. You can handle pressure, Finn. That's why we chose you for today." Sean's insides tensed, but his eyes remained unflinching. Nothing I ain't done before. Sean hadn't told Christy the entire truth last night. He had told him the hit was going to be today, which it was. He also said he didn't know who they were taking out or where, and that was the truth. But he had said Liam wouldn't be there, and that was bollocks. "Well, you ain't done none like this," said Liam. "It's a Garda, a dirty coppa." Sean looked towards the boxing class taking place on the floor, hiding his reaction from Liam. Cold air swept over his skin. His shoulders shuddered, and his mind flashed to images from 4 years ago. He was 27, and the bright lights dazzled overhead. The coach was there, but he hardly remembered him. He remembered Michial and Liam in his corner. His opponent was some hard-bred scouser, as bald as a hard-boiled egg, with a mashed nose and a bitter scowl. The scouser eyeballed Sean, and Sean was shit-scared. "Don't worry about that prick," Liam had said. "He don't look tough. It's some inbred deformity." Sean turned and leant over the corner ring. Michial rubbed his shoulders, speaking sternly. "Come out with 3 fast jabs. Bam, bam, bam. He'll slip the last one, then pow right hook. You tracking?" Sean nodded and spat out agreement over his mouthguard. "All right," said Liam. "Give him hell." The bell dinged. It had been a tough fight, one that went the distance, and when it was all over, the name Finn was called out. He'd won, and the rest of the night was a blur down at Temple Bar. But before the first pint was raised, Sean had been overcome with a feeling, a deep relaxation that settled itself across every inch of his skin. A feeling that told him he didn't have to watch over his shoulder anymore. A feeling that said, "Relax. They trust you. And you trust them. You trust me, don't you, Finn?" Liam patted his shoulder. Sean swallowed and turned back to face him. "Of course I do," he said, his heart burning. That same flame that used to cinder at almost every conversation in his first year while he wormed his way in. Now they had discovered he was undercover, that he was a rat, and they were going to off him. "Good," Liam said. "Trust is important." A car pulled up in the drive, visible beyond the shed's rolled-up door. Christy stepped out of the front, shot Sean a troubled glance, and opened the back door. Michael, the old-school hardman and head of the largest drug trafficking cartel in all of Europe, stepped out. Michial, gray-haired with a stalwart face, raised his hand and beckoned the 2 men. "Come on, lads. Christy's driving." In the back seat, Sean kept his arms folded, squeezing his rib cage as it rose and fell with measured breaths. Liam was on his left, silent and staring out the window as the streets of Dublin flitted by. "I've been in this game for over 30 years, said Michel from the front seat. "And I'll tell you one thing, I've learned a lot. Firstly, if it falls into your lap, then it's too good to be true. Left here," he said to Christy. Christy flicked the indicator. "If you tell me the location, I can just punch it into maps." "No," said Michel. "Where we're going, I don't want the phone to remember." Christy's eyes burrowed into Sean through the rear view mirror. Michel's gnarled finger appeared in the space between the two front seats, and he continued. "Second thing relates to the first. Be careful who you let in. The people you shouldn't trust, the ones who are out to get you, they make it easy. Make your life seem easy, I mean. Anything worthwhile is earned through hard work. Same goes for loyalty. The same thing I'm telling you, Finn. I've been telling Liam all my life. If it comes easy, it's cheap." Apart from the occasional direction from Michel, the rest of the drive was silent, although Sean was in constant communication to the Lord. "God Almighty, I ask for your courage as I venture once more into the crossroads. I'm torn between lives and ashamed to admit I have worn a mask for so long that I have forgotten my own face. I used to honor this job, finding those who lived between the cracks of a broken system, but I find myself slipping deeper into the same space with each passing hour. I am in too deep, and I fear the greater sin, to break my oath to the Garda Síochána, or to turn my back on what has become my family. I'm to blame, Father. I sowed the seeds of betrayal, and now I reap the bitter harvest. As Dublin has witnessed my struggle, may the heavens hear my plea. Pull me from this labyrinth, Lord, once and for all. Amen." Christy pulled up at Ballymun, just north of the M50. Their destination was a large pasture that stretched between Dublin Airport and a litter-filled caravan park. "We're walking," said Michel. The clouds above were a lamb of gray, and although the grass was short, the men seemed to trudge. They were heading in the direction of the airport, by the pasture's boundary, where a snarl of bushes clambered along a chain-link fence. A shovel stood pressed into a mound of dirt, and beneath that opened a wide and deep hole. "You really think we trusted you, you fucking rat?" said Michel, turning around with a black pistol in his hand. Sean closed his eyes, trying to dampen his blazing heart. His lungs pulled in a thick breath of air which only fed the fire more oxygen. He wanted to cry like he almost did in the confession booth, and figured he very well might. Why not? Sean opened his eyes and saw the pistol aimed straight at Christy. "He's an undercover," said Michel. "Been pretending to be my driver, all the while sniffing around my backside." Christy's hands were up, his eyes wide as headlights. "Number I'm no coppa." "Dirty bastard," said Liam, as he pulled out a pistol of his own, a small silver revolver. Michel pointed at his son's gun. "Finn, you're doing the honors." Liam held out the revolver. "Do this, and you're one of us, for true." Sean took the revolver, which was heavier than he anticipated. It sat in his palm, the same size as his hand. The bullet's golden casings stuck out from the chambers. One sat by the pin, anticipating the spark that would explode Sean, free from the maze that had become his life. He just didn't know where to aim it, at Michel or Christy. "Who owns this pasture?" Sean heard himself say. "Don't worry," said Michel. "I know the farmer. The land is only ever used for grazing. The hole's deep, and they don't crop here. The soil will never be disturbed. No one will find him." Sean took a moment, hearing the screech of a plane's engine as it readied for takeoff. Then he aimed the gun at Christy. "On your knees." Christy took a step back. "You can't be serious." "God damn it, get on your knees." Christy began to bend. "Turn around," said Sean, not wanting to see his face. "Turn around and get on your knees." Christy's eyes were darting around as if trying to find some sense in the world. He turned and got on his knees. "Please," he began. "Please, please, please, Jesus Christ, please, God, please." Sean stepped behind Christy and held the gun to his head. Off in the distance, a plane began its long ascent into the clouds above. "Please," mumbled Christy. "Sean, please." Sean leant down, kissed Christy on the cheek, and whispered in his ear, "My name is Finn, farmhouse dinner." Christina wondered how long she should wait before she reported her husband missing. 2 days seemed too soon, but a week too long. Who would take a whole week to notice their husband missing? She held her hot cocoa in both hands, sipping it slowly as she watched the gentle flakes drifting through the pine trees. The first cold snap of the season had come with several inches of snow, and it covered the ground in a white, soft blanket. She loved being alone in her kitchen, and had spent the morning rearranging her utensils, the pots, and her knives for practical use. Everything had a place, and a place for everything. Christina looked around her small house, the contour of her entire world. She didn't miss him. The house felt lighter, cleaner since he walked out the door that last time. Did she even want him back in her life? She frowned. She had to get back to work. Mick's words rang in her head. "Stop standing, get working." Mick couldn't abide her standing still. Everyone and everything on the farm had to have a use. Mick, of course, accepted. He could sit around and drink, complaining the world had it in for him. She put on Mick's thick flannel jacket, much better than her own, only slightly too large, and checked on the chickens, tossing seeds to them, then the few sheep, all safe in the barn. She looked around at what needed fixing, potential improvements. New opportunities for the old equipment clicked through her mind, adding to the long list. She lifted a bale of hay high to drop in the feed chute. The years of farm labor had made her body strong. Once back inside, she looked in the refrigerator. The meat she had pulled out from the deep freezer had thawed, and so she added spices, putting it in the oven with yellow potatoes and peas. She wiped the clean, pristine counter, then looked around at the sparkling kitchen, frowning at the lingering cigarette smoke smell, still recognizable underneath the pine sol she had dosed the room with. It had been 3 days since Mick had walked out of the door, and that seemed about right. She sat down at the kitchen table in front of the phone on the wall, smoothed her faded blue gingham dress as if they could see her, then called the police. "My husband Mick is missing," she said, surprised at the real tears rolling down her cheek. She did miss Mick, his warm body and his gentle laugh. She missed him like she missed being a little girl when she would wear pretty dresses, dreamt of a prince to marry, and her future loomed bright on the horizon. Except those days were gone, just like Mick. What if they actually found him? She had new dreams now. Coffee, officers, or hot cocoa, maybe. Christina's voice met the officers as they walked into her warm kitchen, a powder of snowflakes on their dark uniform jackets. They introduced themselves as they came in. Detective Sergeant John Maloney. Tall and thick with a jaw like a dump truck, he stomped his feet on the stoop before ducking into the house. Behind him, slight and pretty, with her blonde hair pulled back tight in a bun, Officer Kelly Marks stepped inside. "That's quite a road to get here," Lucky we had my 4x4 Bronco. Your little Jap car would have never made it through. D.S. Maloney's voice boomed in the small house, looking over at Officer Marks, who just grimaced at the repeated joke. Thanks. D.S. Maloney took a coffee, and Officer Marks took a hot cocoa with a Gracie has. I speak English. So, you are Christina Santos, and you called about a missing person. A Mickey Mouse, maybe? D.S. Maloney laughed with both thick hands on his hips, his elbows waving, the international flags of asshole. D.S. Maloney snorted at his joke. Both women's eyes stayed on the floor. His name was Mick, Christina said in a low voice. Mick, your husband, has been missing. Officer Marks looked down at a small, pristine notebook. For 3 days. Yes. Christina wiped her eyes with her apron. Mick went out, said he wanted to get something from town, but his truck is still here. Sometimes he goes to a neighbor's house or the bar in town. Oh, I don't know. Christina clenched her apron over and over. Did you look for him or call anyone? D.S. Maloney barked. I don't know who to call. I don't know his friends, other than the men at the Iron Door in town. I called the bar, but he wasn't there. Okay, do you have a description? Officer Marks held her pen at the ready. We can call the local hospitals, other police stations to see if he has turned up. Well, he's a bit taller than me, has dark hair and thicker. She put her arms out, forming a large belly. And his face? Christina squinted one eye closed and turned her face into a deep scowl. Oh. Officer Marks turned away with a frown. Mean mug. Any idea where he could be? D.S. Maloney looked in a cupboard, as if the missing man had been put with the canned peaches instead of the tins of sardines. Maybe he was walking in the forest, chasing a dog or a deer, and he fell and broke his leg. Christina mimed her leg collapsing, hopping, and then, in the snow, she wrapped her arms around herself and shivered. Or a wolf got him. Her strong hands turned into a biting wolf, attacking Officer Marks's arm, who leapt back from the snarling, yapping fingers. But most likely, he'd just run off, tired of me. Christina's chin fell into her chest. D.S. Maloney and Officer Marks caught each other's eyes. I'll check outside. You look around in here. D.S. Maloney leaned into Christina's face. It's okay we look around, right? Nothing to hide. Officer Marks meandered through the house, rubbing her finger on a shelf and then looking at her dustless glove. She opened a tall door in the kitchen, then her eyes went wide. She pulled a broom out of the closet. What's this? D.S. Maloney walked back in. The new snow covered any possible evidence. I found the meat freezer. You're well stocked for the winter, so that's good. I didn't see much else. Officer Marks held up a well-used broom with dark red coloring on the end of the handle. My broom, Christina offered. Is this blood? D.S. Maloney took the broom, his eyes blazing. Sometimes. Christina's hands squeezed her apron against sharing her secret shame. Mick used that if the kitchen wasn't clean enough. Officer Marks looked around the kitchen with her eyes raised. We're going to test this for blood. You want to change your story? No, you can see. Christina pulled her hair back to show a gash, dried blood still dotting the wound. I cleaned up the rest. She collapsed in a chair. Mick used to be helpful, but we lost so many sheep with the scrapie outbreak. Then with his drinking, I wasn't allowed to leave, just work the farm. Mick wanted me to do so much, but he did nothing but drink and curse and hit. Christina fell into deep sobs, her face in her apron. He just wasn't any use, don't you see? D.S. Maloney looked away, then his nose lifted into the air. Well, that smells good. What is that? Christina looked up. That's dinner. I thawed some meat. I needed to cook it. She stood up and looked in the oven. It's done now. I can't eat it all. I had hoped Mick would come home for dinner, but... Christina pulled a long roast out of the oven, the meat pulling back from the bone. Rosemary and thyme filled the kitchen with the aromas from the well-cooked meat. Do you want some? We can't let anything go to waste on a farm. D.S. Maloney looked at Christina, his eyes narrow, and then smiled. Heck yeah, I'm starving. Sitting at the table, he had a large napkin tucked into his shirt collar, a knife in one hand, a fork in the other. We can't do any more searching now. It is too dark and cold. He belched, loudly. This is real good, by the way. I have an idea. He pointed his fork at Officer Marks. Back at the station, you call around. Hospitals, other police stations. I bet he's in someone's drunk tank sleeping off a bender. Good idea, sir. Officer Marks's eyes swept the ceiling before turning to Christina. I thought this would be lamb, since you have a sheep farm, but it is something different. Christina looked up. Her mouth dropped open before she clenched her teeth. Pig, she muttered. A little tough, but pretty good, I agree. She stood up and went to her refrigerator. I have more. She pulled out several bundles and rolled and taped butcher paper. Here is some ground meat. I can't use it all. You should take it. D.S. Maloney pulled off his napkin as he stood up and took the packages. We'll contact you when we have anything further. He nodded and left the kitchen. Officer Marks jumped up to follow D.S. Maloney outside. Sir, there was obviously a fight in that kitchen. I read a story once about a wife who killed her husband with a frozen lamb chop and then fed it to the officers who came to interview her. Do you think... D.S. Maloney narrowed his eyes at Officer Marks before shaking his head. That's the dumbest thing I ever heard of. There is no body. No, he just left. Not that I blame him. She's not all there. He spun his finger around his ear. Officer Marks stepped back inside. Christina stood at the sink, washing a large meat cleaver. We're going to go. Thanks for the meal. Officer Marks headed for the door, then turned back. You know, I had the craziest idea that you killed your husband with that meat you served us, to get rid of the evidence. Christina's mouth dropped open. Oh, that would have been so much easier. Christina shook her head and leaned back into the sink to get to work on the dishes and her new life. Subconscious convictions. They say in the moment of tragedy, time slows down. During those precious seconds, the mind accelerates. Your surroundings blur and disappear as your attention turns inward. You consider the events that led you to this point and what you could, or should, have done different. You consider who this will affect. You're suddenly acutely aware of every regret you have, things you wish you had done, or words you wish you had said to people you may never see again. What they don't tell you is that during this time of reflection, those thoughts don't matter. The steps that led you to this point have already been taken. You cannot change the past, and now must deal with whatever comes as a consequence of your own actions. But what if those thoughts did matter? I'm going to lose my job. That was the first thought that raced through my mind as I watched the man pull a gun from beneath his baggy jacket. The same man I had passed through security only minutes before. This was my first day on the job, and I was already going to lose it. The years I spent in college, scrounging for food and borrowing my friends' couches and car seats just to have a place to sleep. The loans I took from friends, family, and disreputable sources. None of that mattered anymore. as the fruit of my hard-earned labor was going to sour and rot on the very first day. The moment the glint of his pistol caught my attention, my hand was already reflexively reaching for my own holster. In the mere moment it took to draw my gun and form the words on my tongue for the man to drop his weapon, I was presented with a choice. Do I fire at the man whose own gun is pointed at the young woman behind the desk? Or do I wait and try to talk him down? If I hesitate, he could kill the woman before I fire. Or I could fire first, not giving him the chance to stand down. What if the gun was fake, and this was just an attempt at intimidation? Does this scenario meet the requirements for the rules of engagement? With my decision made, I shout for the man to put down the gun. Before the last word had fled from my mouth, an explosive sound that will, from that moment on, forever haunt my waking moments rings out. I made the wrong judgment. The man pulled the trigger. Time continues to crawl by as the young woman's body drops to the ground, red misting the air and painting the wall behind her as she crumples out of sight behind the desk. Seemingly to compensate for its slowed pace, time then speeds up. People scream and drop to the ground. A mother flings herself over her child. An elderly man clutches his chest and faints. I have little recollection of what follows. I'm sure police arrive and subdue the man, as I suddenly find myself sitting outside on the curb. Uniformed officers question me. I'm not sure what answers I give them. All I can do is stare at their holstered guns. 3 seconds. That was all the time it took for the man to pull his weapon and end a life. Those 3 seconds play on repeat over and over. I lose my job due to my own negligence. If I had followed proper procedure, I would have found the man's gun as he came through security. Out a job, and with a permanent black mark on my record, my degree and certifications become nothing more than useless pieces of paper. My brand new car I financed is repossessed. I return to couch surfing and lending in order to get through each day. Loud sounds now terrify me. The bang of a car door closing has me reflexively reaching for a sidearm that isn't there, only for nausea to rise at the mere thought of a weapon. Red mist and a body crumbling to the ground. It only took 3 seconds for that man to pull his pistol and kill. I can no longer make decisions for myself. I fear that whatever choice I make will be the wrong one, somehow causing another life to end. Second-guessing every move I make completely overwhelms my day-to-day actions. I cannot help but spiral within my own tortured thoughts to the point where I am too terrified to even move. It only took 3 seconds. The instant the man pulled the gun from his jacket, instinct led me to grab my son, push him to the tile floor, and cover his small body with my own. The only thought racing through my mind was his protection. Having only recently lost his father, I couldn't fathom losing Evan as well. A spray of red, the body of a young woman falling to the floor, the thud of her body colliding with tile echoing in my head. What if that had been Evan? What if he were older than the one working behind the desk when someone decided that they would end his life? Who would have protected him if I wasn't here? The security guard by the door, frozen with his gun raised, solidifies my resolve that no one can protect Evan like I can. It takes 3 police officers to pry me from my son's protection. Only after several reassurances that the gunman has been subdued and that we are safe am I willing to detach myself from Evan. Sweeping my sobbing 4-year-old into my arms, I hold him close as I provide the police with my statement, receive the okay from medical personnel to leave, and speed the safety of our small home. That could have been Evan standing behind the counter. no one can protect him like I can. With school shootings a very real possibility, I pull Evan out of school just in case. I find a new job that will allow me to work from home while homeschooling at the same time. Groceries are delivered to the house, contact-free, of course. The only times I find myself not being able to avoid leaving the safety of our home are for regular visits to the doctor's office. I put these off for as long as I can without risking Evan's health. Every individual we pass is a threat, as who knows what weapons they carry, hidden beneath their clothing. Who knows what intentions they may have, or when they might decide to take their frustrations out on my innocent child. A local news broadcast covers the story of an injured criminal waking during surgery and attacking the caretakers and 2 bystanders. What if Evan and I had been there for an appointment? Even the hospitals weren't safe anymore. I called and canceled Evan's upcoming checkup. The doctor's office called at least once a day for a week straight to reschedule Evan's appointment. I let every call ring to voicemail. I know what is best for Evan. No one can protect him like I can. The phone calls eventually stop. The following week, 2 police officers arrive at our house, claiming the hospital staff called asking for them to ensure we were okay. I reiterate through the closed door that all is well, but I refuse to open my home to them. I can see from the window the weapons they carry. What if they are not really police officers? What if they are here to hurt Evan? The next day, the police return with a woman dressed in a pantsuit and claiming to be from Child Protective Services. I refuse them entry and tell Evan to hide in his room. The woman claims that she is worried for my son's well-being and begs me to open the door. She doesn't have to worry about Evan. That is my job. Only I can protect him. They took Evan from me. They came in force, showing me documents that mean nothing to me as I sit handcuffed on my own couch. They claim I am not mentally fit to take care of my own son, as if they know anything about me or the dangers the outside world presents to my innocent child. I try to get them to understand that he needs me, that only I can protect him. Why can't they understand? They tell me I can argue my case in court. Why does no one understand? How can no one see how dangerous the world is? It only takes one man with a gun deciding to end a life. No one can protect Evan like I can. The customer service smile I have plastered on my face falls away as the man across the desk from me reaches beneath his jacket and pulls free a pistol. Despite the situation, I find myself surprised by the condition of the gun. My father was an avid weapon collector, and, as his only child, I was subjected to hours of instruction on all topics involving firearms. The man's gun isn't anything special, and is a brand that most households have stashed away somewhere for home defense. What caught my attention was the poor condition of the weapon. Scuffs and scratches cover most of the surface, and bare metal glints through gouged paint and texture. Wherever this man had obtained the gun from, there was a good chance it was either stolen or sold illegally. By the time the last remnants of my smile disappear and my quick analysis of the man's pistol ends, I realize too late that I am the target of his aggression. Raised by a gun enthusiast, I thought I had seen them from every angle. I realized then that never have I stared down the barrel of one. It was a sight immediately burned into my mind, and one I never wanted to see again. I watch in slow motion as the muscles just under the skin of the man's hands tense and his finger begin to pull the trigger. I can't help but think with irony that I won't have to worry about living with that fear. Silence follows the explosion of a firing pistol. The scene before me is familiar, though I can't determine why or how. I stand before a young woman, a waist-high desk the only barrier between us. My right hand grips the cold, unfamiliar metal of the pistol I purchased from a stranger earlier this morning. I stare down the top of the gun at the young woman. She seems more interested in the details of the gun rather than the fact that it is aimed directly at her. There is something familiar about this woman, though I am sure I have never met her before. An irritating itch nags in the back of my mind that something here isn't right. I have been here before, but where am I? I want to turn and take in my surroundings, but am unable to move anything other than my eyes. Time seems to have slowed to a near pause. Glancing at the surface of the desk, I notice a stack of credit card flyers. Oh, that's right. I'm at a bank. One of the few left that actually handle cash instead of digital currency. Why am I at the bank? The memories come slowly, as though I am recollecting them through a vat of honey. The images are hazy at first, but slowly become clearer. I am desperate. The company I worked at collapsed due to fraud. As an accounting associate, I was one of the prime suspects in the case. It has been 2 years since I was accused as an accomplice, and the investigation is still ongoing. In those 2 years, my entire life fell apart. My fiancée left me, taking the word of the media over the man she planned to marry. She took our unborn child with her, refusing to allow me any part in the child's life. Do the investigation, I couldn't find a job. I lost my fiancé, child, and career. I lost all reason to continue to try. All I have left is a roof over my head, and even that will be gone soon unless I do something. Robbing the bank wasn't a thought-out plan, but rather a decision made in desperation. Why had I thought this would be a good idea? I've never done anything like this before. This isn't me. Who have I become? The eyes of the woman before me begin to widen as she realizes she is staring down the barrel of my gun. Realization, surprise, fear, and then acceptance cross her features within a heartbeat. My hand tenses, my index finger beginning to pull the trigger. Wait. I've been here before. I've done this before. I've killed this woman already. Why am I doing this? For money? Is this really how far I have fallen? Would I really consider killing a woman for whatever change she might have in the drawer? Wait, no. I have already considered this. In fact, I have already done it. I am staring down the sights of my gun into the eyes of a dead woman. That is why she is familiar to me. I know I've killed her, but I don't remember what happened afterwards. Was I arrested? Was I shot? Glancing to my right, I notice a woman in the process of throwing herself over a young boy. Her son, Evan. Evan? Why do I know the boy's name? That isn't all I know. I know that the mother will be so scarred from my actions that she will hide her child away from the world, paranoid and plagued by the idea of some stranger hurting the only family she had left. Evan will spend the rest of his childhood in the foster care system. I've never met them before. So why do I know this? I shift my attention to my left, where a young security guard points his own firearm in my direction, his mouth open in a silent shout. I can see the fear and indecision wrought into his features. He will lose his job and any chance of a healthy life due to my actions today. Finally, I look back to the woman before me. She loses her life because of me. These are my victims. I can see the consequences these innocent bystanders will spend the remainder of their lives trying to cope with. All because I was desperate to pay my rent. I don't want this. I don't want to kill this young woman who has done nothing to wrong me. I don't want to cause the security guard to spend the rest of his life terrified of strangers and loud noises. I don't want Evan to grow up without his mother. My hand relaxes, and the gun soundlessly clatters to the ground before everything fades to black. Looking up from the report, scrolling across his tablet, Jared smiled at his supervisor, Dr. Daniels, who had just entered the lab. "Good afternoon, Doctor." The subject passed on the first run. His remorse caused a shift in his subconscious, and he dropped the gun before killing the woman this time. Dr. Daniels nodded, a bit of the ever-present tension in his shoulders relaxing. "That is good. Pull him out of the simulator and send the report to the recovery team. With luck, he'll be eligible for reintegration within the next year or so." After receiving the affirmative from his associate, Dr. Daniels headed for the door, sparing one last glance at the man lying on the bed connected to the simulator unit. The device was revolutionary to solving overcrowding within the municipal system. Based on their progress with therapists and reports provided by behavioral specialists, qualified convicts are removed from their cells and transferred to one of a few facilities housing advanced neurological simulators. Rather than spend years within a cell comprised of bars and mortar, they are instead imprisoned within the walls of their own subconscious. They are then subjected to relive the events of the crime they committed, as well as experience firsthand the impact their misconduct left on their victims. The results were astounding, proving that remorse and guilt, if stressed on a deeply subconscious level, could change the morality of an individual. Rather than spend the remainder of their lives behind bars, these ex-convicts would receive a second chance. Depending on their results after undergoing intense therapy, they would be allowed to reintegrate into a controlled section of society, a sector that was developed specifically for these individuals. They would not be allowed to return to the public, as retribution is still demanded for their actions. They would, however, be provided the opportunity to work in their chosen profession, earn a wage, and make something better of themselves while serving out the remainder of their sentence. Tearing his gaze from the man lying in the hospital bed, Dr. Daniels stepped out of the room and headed for the next lab.